Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Four Horsemen. I have been deemed to be the lead on this one, as we all fight over who has to do the introductions, because no one likes doing introductions. So it's me, even though I'm kind of really the third shitty horseman, just above the guest in many ways in the hierarchy of things. But that's fine. I am going to do the introduction to this topic.
Who told him that, Monty? I told you that was in complete confidence. Like that was not to be revealed until episode 100.
Just like on gamers all over again. So anyway, I am the lead on this. It is an episode about esports journalism, but before your eyes roll up into your skulls and you decide to leave and go and do something more interesting, it will be a juicy one because there have been recent developments in the world of League of Legends, particularly with how Riot are interacting with the press and how they are filtering questions from their broadcast press conferences and huddles that has led one of its brightest stars. Travis Gafford, of course, everyone knows him and loves him. He is the, iconoclastic journalist, isn't he? Always fighting for the little guy, taking on those big companies. And he's having a bit of a brouhaha with Riot over this. So we're going to talk about that and some other topics besides. Obviously, MonteCristo, no stranger to Riot's ire and wrath. Thorin, probably the same. Me, I'm just persona non grata. I did something these guys could never achieve. That I made Riot Thanos me out of existence. And of course, as our special guest, we've got Jacob Wolf, one of the lead investigative journalists in esports, formerly of ESPN, now with Dot Esports, if memory serves me correctly. Am I right?
Yeah,
Got it right? Yeah, perfect. I didn't even research that. So he will be giving us some unique, valuable perspective and perhaps a more balanced one than what I will be doing. Right. That's my 30 seconds. I've been fucking sensible. Boys, let's get into the topic at hand. Thorin, over to you.
All right. Basically, this all stems from Travis coming out. It's something he's done in the past. There's a precedent for this behavior. And what happens is he tends to come out and he presents like, look, I'm bringing a story forwards. I've gotten some information from Riot that what they're going to do is, and then he explains, right? And in doing so, basically, we'll get to the specifics, but the trend tends to be like this. He's nearly always absolutely correct about what he's talking about, like what they're planning on doing, what's going to come down the pipe. But the problem and what is going to be part of the ambience of having a talk about this topic is he is inextricably linked to the topic because he only ever acts in his own self-interest. I'm talking his literal self-interest, as in if he was stood up in a queue right outside the Riot offices and they were like, right, everyone who comes in this office, we're going to shoot in the head with a bullet. He'd wait until he was the last one to go in and go, I think we should maybe do some sort of a boycott or something. This is no way to do it. It's like they're all gone. They're all dead, mate. Like it's too late. You let everyone else go in one by one. So essentially the story on this one was Riot basically a few years ago, I think now they started to implement, like post-game press conferences, kind of like sports, like at Worlds, obviously you have it. Understandable, by the way, for Worlds. Sometimes you can have an enormous amount of media. You might have a very limited amount of time for the team that wins, for example. In things like the LCS, a little bit more questionable. We can get into some of the abstractions there. Like, for example, as far as I know, there isn't like 80 press people go, do we need those people to all be filtered? Bro, okay, they start the post-game press conference in the line of sports. And of course, people like Travis want to get their questions in. They want to have their video that goes on their channel. Now, the issue is Riot, as the one thing I'll give them props for, they always do boil the frog generally. Like they don't just go straight from 0 to 100. They tend to go in steps, and they even do that like sort of political approach of like, whoa, they're going too ham on that one. Go back one step, and then they wait to go forwards again in the future incrementally. So essentially what Riot did was they went to like, you don't interview the players anymore. You do a press conference. In fact, submit your questions to our press conference. And then you know what? If we don't like those don't even get through. So they sort of went in stages, and now we're basically at the point where effective immediately for the LCS, as far as I can tell, Riot can just essentially completely deny a journalist's questions, whether or not he previously was approved, whether he's worked there, whether he has a tenure working in the space. Basically, Riot controls all the communication from the players and the people in their coaching staff, etc. Did I miss any details on that one? I think that was the basic story, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's for the Friday interviews with the players. So I think they're still distributing individual players later on, but it's Saturday like the first Sunday, day. And then also on top of that, it started out by doing this when they typically have a press conference where you can ask, it's a bunch of, in this case, people on like a Zoom call or whatever, or a Discord call, especially with the commissioner and like league operations and the leadership, having to pre-submit questions like 4 days in advance, and then having a PR person ask those questions, the selected questions, to the people, and then having kind of a limited opportunity to follow up. So it wasn't that there was no follow-up to the questions as they were being asked, but it was very limited in the capacity to do so, which is also just very unusual. Very unusual that they would control this, especially because, and by the way, I would encourage everybody to go watch Travis's video about this. The problem is not with what Travis was saying, because I actually think he brings up some really good points. It was more that it was Travis saying it, given his past history, that makes it somewhat problematic. But in isolation, not to play like whataboutism about what Travis has done previously, including literally pre-screening questions on his own content, and employing these same practices, which he did to me personally.
Thanks to me, by the way.
Regardless.
I was the one that made that happen. I went on the show before you wanted to go on the show.
Thank you.
Yes, there you go.
Anyway, but yeah, but the point is that video in isolation, he brings up a lot of super good points that we're going to go through on this show, and I do generally agree with what he said, and I'm sad he didn't come on the show today to talk about it. And we tend to view, this show is all about being reasonable, trying to have long form conversations to get to the bottom of something, and I agree that with Travis that this is kind of an unorthodox practice and cause for alarm. And I agree that with his point that where he says that setting this up as a precedent in esports is extremely dangerous and will be used in the future for appeal to antiquity logical fallacies, where people will say, well, this is always how it's been done in esports in 5 years from now. So we kind of have to break this before it starts, because it leads to a total lack of transparency within our industry. And also, just doesn't, put a face or a voice or, real individual opinions to these issues from Riot personnel, like Riot managers, Riot executives, which I think is problematic.
I actually agree with Travis in terms of this being like a problematic policy from Riot on the way that they handle press conferences. I'm very against pre-screen questions. If anybody ever asks me, I just generally tend to do bullet point topics. We're going to hit on this, right? I'm not going to outline every single question. What's the point of being on a voice interview or whatever at that point? And I get asked that a lot by PR reps, and I interview some pretty powerful people, so it's not particularly unexpected. I think the devil's advocate to that I've heard from other members of the media throughout all of this the past few weeks is that LCS press tends to be quite amateur, with sites like ESPN and others following. There's a lot of people in that LCS press Discord, myself included, who don't have a lot of experience, and so there's definitely been on occasion the hey, for using as a fake example, hey Dardoc, what should I build on Rumble? Right? Some stupid game question you could go look up on MobaFire or whatever fucking site you want to use for your league guys.
Basically,
yeah, and I agree that that's dumb and you should try to figure out how to filter it. But in my opinion, there's also a social repercussion for that. If you're a member of the media and that's your question, you ask a pro player how to build a champion rather than going to look it up. One, you look like an idiot in front of all your peers. Right? Everybody else who's in the press conference thinks you're stupid. The pro player thinks you're stupid, right? They're going to remember you for that one question when 2 years later you're more mature and you ask an important question. They'd be like, aren't you the guy that asked me how to build Rumble 2 years ago, right? Whatever the thing is. And so there is a social blowback. And then if Riot doesn't want that person back, if they do that every press conference for an entire split, don't credential them for the next split.
Yes.
Right? Rather than impact the entire journalist corps, the entire press corps, just punish the one journalist for being out of turn and pull them aside if you're a Riot PR person. Be like, hey, stop asking the stupid questions. This is your next shot, and if it doesn't clean up, you're not coming back. Right? I can get down with that. That's fine. But I think screening everyone, especially the fact that there are people from Dot, Upcomer, Esports Insider, etc., in that press corps that are mature, that have done our homework, have done the thing, know how to interact with pro players as professionals. I think punishing sort of the more professionalized journalists in the space is not good.
Also worth pointing out, just as an aside, it's an obvious conflict of interest because if Riot, who themselves essentially, I always say this because until the economics change in esports, this is just essentially the way the industry works. Riot's main customer for the LCS is the person who bought the LCS slot, basically the teams. So what you're doing is letting Riot potentially say to their real customer, the team, if you don't want me to ask questions, like let's say, for example, about Alfari, if it was Team Liquid the last 3 weeks, it's okay. I'll make sure that those don't get through the pre-screening. Or I'll make sure that the one you want gets through, the one that's like, isn't there maybe another, the one that is the shill question. So that in itself is a dangerous precedent to me. It's like, I wouldn't mind, as Jacob says here, if someone, listen, we can obviously have like an eye test to this. If someone's asking patently stupid questions that are time wasting questions, that's going to be pretty easy to tell, contrasted with like, if they say, oh, it's just time wasting, but the person's asking like hard hitting questions, they've done the journal, you're going to be able to tell just by hearing if that's nonsense or not. So I'm not against the premise of like essentially a tiered system of credentialing. Like if you just start and you go there and you're a nobody guy like you're talking about, you're at the bottom and you have to sort of, maybe you have to ask if you get asked 1 or 2 questions, and as long as they're legit, you get a bit more rope, as it were. And then the people who've been there years and years have, like the best pass or whatever. Because part of this, by the way, that ties back into the whole Travis issue is these are issues that Travis has benefited from in the past. Like I remember years and years and years ago when literally anyone, essentially as long as you could get on the list, could just go and be a journalist. And in doing so, after a game, as long as you could find them in the corridor, you could ask any player. You could ask the best player in the world. You could ask the worst. Well, it wouldn't be an LCS, but you know what I mean. You could ask like Piglet or fucking Doublelift or something. You could ask anyone for an interview. Now, I will say, I remember when one of the first things Riot changed was they were like, well, now what you're going to have to do is if you want like a player interview, you've got to ask us and then we'll go and ask the player. And I remember saying to Travis, like, dude, how can you be in favor of this? Like, this is bullshit. Like, we literally are supposed to be people who came up learning networking skills. In other words, how to convince someone that they might want to do an interview with you or how to get over the fact that they might have like initial resistance. And so I said to him, dude, like, literally, first of all, if you're good at your job, you'd want that because that's an advantage you have over the guy who just came and doesn't know anyone. Yep. Like, he has to essentially get credentialed by learning stuff. But secondly, in this scenario, it's going to help you in the short term because if you're someone like Travis, you're just going to get your interview probably. They're going to go, especially back then, they're going to go and get your Meteors or fucking Doublelift or whoever you want for the interview. I said, but you are realizing, like, eventually, first of all, they'll use that against you one day when you're the one they don't want to come for the interview. And secondly, you're just getting a leg up unfairly in that scenario over some of the other people. So it's all, I find that whole topic like always a slippery slope because they'll always give a good reason they want to bring in one of these, like, essentially like a layer of gatekeeping. And I agree, by the way, with the premise of gatekeeping idiots out of the space. Of course, it's going to waste everyone's time, but you have to be really careful, as always, with who decides what the gatekeeping is and what the metrics are.
Well,
it's also
on the jump in. No,
yeah, to go back to that point, I think that one of the other things that needs to be mentioned too is that when we talk about Riot, they've always had some questionable media policies, and they've played this gatekeeping game that Thorin is talking about. Remember when they literally banned Loco Doco from doing interviews without giving any kind of real reason, which seriously impacted Loco's livelihood, and also conveniently removed him as a potential competitor to Travis. And so I think like outright banning people from being on site and doing these interviews is also a practice that they have engaged in and not been transparent on in the past, which is I don't think that banning Loco Doco was good for the broader LCS content scene, and we didn't hear a lot at that point in time. But they've kind of it's been this show is going to be about a lot of the kind of media policies and practices that they have beyond what Travis discusses, because this has been a long time coming. Basically, there's been a lot of weird stuff going on over the last couple of years. Richard,
Rich, before you go, can I talk? I want to hark back to just something Duncan said.
Yeah, do it. Go on.
He was talking, Duncan, you were talking about sort of the kind of like the privilege attached to being one of those top journalists. It's funny how like crazy wishy-washy that can be. So like my first Riot event was MSI 2015. And I was able to actually get a fair amount of access, kind of just what Riot was doing, what they do now and have done for the past 6 years. They were gatekeeping who got what, right? But I was like putting in requests for some of the best players in the world and getting them in front of me. And 6 months later, not even 6 months later, I was at LCS finals in New York. I paid my way to go there as a freelancer. Sort of had a plan to do enough content to make my money back while working for Daily Dot as a freelancer at the time. And I was credentialed. Everything was great. It was smooth. I got to New York City. I stayed in Queens, commuted to Madison Square Garden. And we get there and they go, okay, no one gets interviews except for Travis and ESPN. and Travis was at CBSI at the time. I think GameSpot by that point. I think On Gamers had finally caved in on itself because of the whole Reddit ban. But
cheers, Slasher.
Anywho, yeah. So like, we all were credentialed and just sitting there with nothing to do. Like, I went and met a few people. It was a good networking experience for me, if nothing else. But it was like a $1,200 networking experience that I didn't make any money back on because I couldn't do any content other than what I could have done from home. And I was credentialed. I was in the Madison Square Garden press room where the Knicks beat reporters sit, and it just didn't matter. And so I think kind of both of what you were talking about and what Monty was talking about earlier, like, this is someone, and I've been there too, as someone that worked at ESPN, that like they privilege these types of people, and then suddenly the privilege goes away, and it's this huge deal with no inter-reflection. That's what really bothered me about the Travis thing, is he didn't look at the privilege that he's gotten his entire career in talking about Riot's media policies as a whole.
Yeah.
And by the way, as a theme, because you're going to see this throughout the episode, like I said with Travis, like, he doesn't get that fucking line out of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like, Sauron doesn't share power. He thinks he does every time. He thinks he can be Saruman in every scenario. He doesn't realize Riot just waits until, there's no one left for you, and then they just fuck you finally. That's what they do with everyone.
So like, I've got material for Travis, so let me know when we're ready to go in on that.
Well, maybe keep it more abstract initially, get the boys to part away.
I've got the receipts, and I've been rehearsing it. I want to make sure I get it right.
All right.
So
did you practice it in the mirror?
No, because it's one of those things. It's like I have to kind of astrally project myself to get to a level of calm, because it just makes me so irate to see this guy think he's actually equipped to talk about any of this stuff. This fucking jellyfish. I can't believe, like, put it this way. I think you're even being generous by saying that what he's saying is actually okay. So on that regard, let's talk about policy. First of all, with Riot Games in general, it has been, as you rightly and astutely said, Duncan, they don't fucking chuck the frog in the fucking pan of water when it's already scalding. They let you sit in, they let you marinate in it, they warm it up. You think, ooh, this is a lovely bath. And before you fucking know it, someone's farting in your face, and all your data's been sold to China. That's how Riot Games operate.
It's metaphor, but I get your point.
Yeah. I couldn't keep up with the frog stuff. I just had to make it stuff they've actually done. So anyway, their approach to journalism has always been one of, if you play ball with us, we'll play ball with you. The only kind of journalism Riot Games has ever understood is access journalism. You say what we want, you stay on message, and if you prove you can do it, 1 event, 2 event, and you don't do anything we don't like or disagree with, next time you want that big interview with the person, we'll give it to you. Next time you want a little scoop or a little crumb of information that behooves us, we'll give it to you. And that's what it is. It's you give action, you get action. It's access journalism. So this policy is perfectly in line with a company who only views journalism through the lens of how does it serve us. Now, by the way, as I do believe Riot is just an entity of pure, unfettered evil, I don't even have a problem with them being that way. I think it is a toxic, irredeemable company that employs some of the most heinous people who've ever worked in esports, as being evidenced in the constant slew of lawsuits and horror stories. And it's been that way for years, and people like me knew about it for years, but we were deemed the bad ones, because we would say, in a way you don't like, you people out there in fucking cyberspace, well, he's a bit brash, isn't he? Yeah, he is speaking up for women who are being fucking, like, sexually preyed upon, or systemic sexism in the workplace. But, at the end of the day, I don't like the way he says it. So you were all fine with that, by the way, League of Legends community. You tacitly supported that when you drove people like me out. Good job. So that's fine. You sleep with that at night. At the end of the day, Riot Games, it's completely from a point of self-interest, which is all I ever expect Riot Games to do. So this shouldn't surprise anybody. And the last person it surprises is Travis. I'm pretty sure he knew this was coming. He is not even annoyed at the policy, by the way. His video reveals that. He's such a doofus. He can't even cloak his inner thoughts, his inner monologue, his dark secrets from people.
As in, if he'd have been allowed to get his questions through, you think he would have thought it was an okay policy, like I said earlier?
He actively says, as I'm sure Jacob will go into now, he actively says the problem with the policy was that he adhered to it. He followed it. So understand, if you have a problem with a policy, you don't say, I will go along with said policy. You say, wait a fucking minute. But he went along with it like a good boy, and he submitted his question.
Okay.
And if his question had been asked in a timely fashion, he would have been fine with it. But it wasn't. Somebody else got to scoop him. By the way, what he thinks is a fucking scoop is just a joke to somebody like me. But he got scooped on a very important question he thought he would get answered first. Upcomer did an interview while that question was going through the pipe. And so the big important question that only super smart Travi Gafford could ask got answered in someone else's exclusive. And then he went fucking bananas. And that's why he made that video.
Yeah, here's the thing. I've thought about for a long time about trying to do some collective body of like particularly League journalists, but also anyone covering Overwatch, Call of Duty, right? Like against the bigger parties, right? If we consider kind of the two big esports parties, right? Counter-Strike's a huge game, but Valve's not really involved, so it's hard to negotiate against one central body. But if you think about like the MLB Press Association, right? That negotiates against the MLB for access, how policies are made, right? I've thought about like trying to organize. I've talked to several people in the space about trying to organize something like that against Riot and against Activision Blizzard, because those two companies have a lot of power, and they have a lot of power who you get to. And you know, again, like I don't think like the scrum is where you're going to get the hard-hitting investigative journalism or like the actual real questions. If you're going to do that, you reach out on a separate note, or you try to get someone on that weekend. I don't even really go through the LCS Discord to try, or even Riot, to try to get a lot of these interviews. When I actually have an important question, I just go direct to the team or direct to the person, and then I have them, go call your PR person and then have them talk to me. We'll sort it out, right? But I have thought about that because I think I am maybe Richard, you fall into this category too, but I think I may be the only journalist in the space who has had a credential revoked by both Riot and Activision Blizzard actively at events. And so I've thought about like, how do you fix that? And both, by the way, were because I was doing reporting. One was around the Rox Tiger story. I had my credential revoked that weekend because I was a little bit of an asshole.
That was accurate again, by the way.
Yeah. I was a little bit of an asshole, to be fair to them. They were lying to me, to my face, but I was an asshole in the way that I handled it. I actively called a Riot PR person a liar to his face, and got quite loud, in front of a bunch of people. So again, was a little bit of a dick in how I handled it, but nonetheless, a point still valid. And then the Activision Blizzard case, the Overwatch League finals in 2018, I went to a media day on Thursday. And then after media day, on the walk back to my apartment, because I lived like a mile and a half, 2 miles away, in New York, I broke this story, called for comment, then broke the story that the Guangzhou and Paris teams were joining the league, and then showed up Friday for a breakfast at Barclays Center with a source before the event, and was told, you're not on the ESPN broadcast list, because they had a broadcast desk, and you're not on the media list either.
Jesus.
Yeah, so... I don't know how that changes in a day.
Fun side story about that Rox Tigers thing. So here's a crazy one for you. So by the way, neither I nor my wife Susie were at Worlds that year, and Susie was close to the Rox Tigers personally, and worked at Twitch at the time. And I know, Jacob, you had to tell Riot that Susie was not your source, but Riot,
they did
as a result as a result of your reporting, they talked to Twitch and put pressure on Twitch because my wife worked there. So they contacted Twitch and accused my wife of leaking that story, which she categorically did not do. She wasn't even there and had no idea like that this was going on at the time. But they tried to put pressure on my wife to to Twitch itself to reprimand my wife
She
as a
worked
result
for
of
Twitch at the
this.
time. Like, I think you didn't mention that detail. Like, she was actually like an
Yes,
employee.
she was a Twitch employee.
Twitch career or whatever, right?
And even though she had nothing to do with this, they thought, and this is how they work, they thought
that actually,
my wife was the source. And you had to go, Jacob, and tell them categorically that my wife was not the source.
They said
report.
the same person I called a liar to their face actually said to me, "Well, Susie is your source," and I said, "No, she's not. What the hell?" And I like, why would I have one?
Because I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know either.
Yeah, and I was just like, no, she's not. And I'm not just covering her ass. As like, I really am not. Susie was not a source. And the craziest thing about that entire thing, the lie, right, that I got my credential revoked over, what they were lying to me about is they told me that Sejin, the manager of the Rocks Tigers, was not in Chicago. So I had this story for close to a month, and I was waiting because I was going to the quarterfinals of Worlds. I wanted to have a sit-down, face-to-face meeting with the manager of Rocks Tigers to talk through this story, right, and do my diligence, be nice to them, right, be very kind and respectful to this team because I understood the position they were in, the sensitivity around the issue, etc., right? And so I approached a Riot person the first day of that event, and I said, all I want is an off-the-record meeting with this person. I am going to write a story, but I want to talk to them before this story goes out. That's it. That was my request, right? And they came back to me and they said, we will give you a comment if you wait until after Worlds, which would be another 3 weeks, by the way.
Old classic.
And then
Just
is not, and then she is not here, which was a lie. She was there. I know she was there. She was telling people I knew that she was there. So I was trying to get a conversation with her before the story went out. And then, they Rocks wins their quarterfinal match. They were in the upper level of the Chicago theater. And I didn't get a single interview. I was the only person in the press not to get an interview. Shocking. And I saw Gorilla kind of just standing by himself off to the side. I went up, introduced myself. Recorder wasn't even in my hand, wasn't on. I went up, I introduced myself casually, said that I was a friend of Fion's, right? Because he knew Fion quite well. I said I was a friend of Fion's, worked with him. And before I knew it, a person ran across the arena, grabbed me, pulled me aside, and escorted me out. And said, and then later claimed that I was harassing Gorilla for having a off-the-record, less than 5-minute conversation with a player. And then I had my credential revoked. I had to explain to ESPN why my credential was revoked by the biggest company in all of gaming, all of esports. And it was a mess. And my credential remained revoked for the remainder of Worlds. It was not resolved until after Worlds. I went to LA. I already had my plane ticket, my hotel booked. I went to LA with 4 Worlds, Worlds Finals, without a credential. And I ended up getting a suite pass to the Axiomatic suite and had a better time anyway. But nonetheless, like, I showed up with nothing, all because of that. And I was trying to be respectful. That was my intent. Was I an asshole when I was lied to? Yes, I was. But just the way that it was handled was not cool.
The story that was being reported by you at the time was that the Rocks Tigers were breaking up after Worlds and the roster was going their separate way, which, for those of you who don't know,
roster move story. It wasn't even like fucking Watergate or anything.
Oh, no.
It was a team that was going to disband.
It was in financial disarray.
They didn't have enough money to keep the players, basically.
And by the way, some of their players were meeting with team owners in fucking hotel lobbies. Yes. At Worlds with NA team owners. And it's like, you want to see, like, what press member is going to walk into that Hilton or whatever and see someone in San Francisco or Chicago and go, why is that player talking to that team owner?
By the way, if anyone thinks Jacob's over exaggerating about the heavy-handed physical side of shit, I did one Riot event on the official press corps, which was All Stars in Paris.
All right, 2014.
Yeah, so showing my age, but that was when I was still in the kind of trenches, and I got fucking manhandled there, because I had a camera around my neck, and they had a bunch of areas where it was like designated no filming, but what no filming means in Riot parlance is any recording equipment being cited or is considered like verboten.
Kids undercover or some shit.
Yeah, so fucking I would like walk through an area that they told me I could walk through to go and do an interview. I think it was Meteos or whatever. And fucking some fucking goon like grabbed me and tried to twist his fucking my arm up my back and all that, telling me that I was like some sort of spy.
It's
And like
just
click, like we know who you are, like it was fucking surreal, dude.
The
Like
entire
these people are fucking sick in the head. Like
the entire way just that company handles press is really quite appalling sometimes because like I don't know if you guys know this, Monty, I would assume you do because I think you've been there, but like just to go to Riot Campus, you have to sign an NDA that is like super long and in perpetuity for years and covers any information given to you by a Riot employee. So someone like me, right, signing that is a career death wish because they could sue me if they ever figured out an employee was a source on a story 2 years later, unrelated, right? Like that is super dangerous. So I've never been they don't do that for the LCS, they do it for HQ, but I was supposed to go have lunch with a PR person that just got hired when I was in LA at one point at Riot Campus. I had never been there. I was going to go. I was going to meet this person, kind of do an off the record handshake, get to know someone. And I was like, okay, well, you have to sign this. And I was like, I'm not signing this. Like this will like really impact my career. Oh, well, we wouldn't do anything about it. I don't believe that. And I also don't want to put that trust in someone else's hands. So I decided not to, and I had to go have lunch with them kind of off campus, which doesn't seem like a big idea, or a big deal, but like the fact that you're asked as a member of the press visiting a campus to sign an NDA that lasts that long for years, like that's not, Jesus.
All I'm going to say is like, well, no, it's like, that could be viewed as some sort of entrapment for you as well. Like you don't know what the motives of this are because in my wife's case, like I can't imagine how many other times they've done this. I mean, they didn't have any evidence that she was the source and they were pressuring, and her employer, Twitch, had to conduct an investigation on that. And it threatened her job basically. And so how many other times that we don't know about has this happened, but they lash out with very little evidence, like, and supposition about what's going on. And it's scary. It's
Even
scary.
though, listen, they own the IP rights to the game. It's not the same as traditional sports structures. Like essentially, you do on some level have to deal and have some fucked up, even the most abstract concept of a relationship with Riot Games in order to be part of their official events. It's an absolutely just a fact of the matter. And to some degree, as Richard says, they could be tyrants if they want. They could just say, fuck everyone, we're going to lock all this down. But I'd at least appreciate the bloody honesty. Instead, what they do is they give every pretense that they're the most fucking egalitarian company, and that they'll even always try and bill these things, by the way, as like, this is to help the little guy. What about the new journalist who's coming in? Like, they'll have every fucking reason in the world to bring stuff through. But one thing I want to get rid of is this, like, false sense that they are literally owed, and we are obligated to give them the maximum level of civility possible. Nah, I'm not buying that. Here's the thing. When you start out, yes, in the same way as I do personally, actually judge people very harshly, just like on a colloquial basis, by how they treat, like, for example, like, a fucking someone who works on a bus or in a fast food place or whatever. Like, in my opinion, if you treat those people like trash for no reason, there's something dark inside you that you're projecting out onto the world, and how you just encounter people who are essentially just serving you in your everyday life. So, right. With that said, though, if those people are very rude to you or very unprofessional to you, at that point in time, it almost becomes appropriate that you would no longer speak to these people in a civil manner. Like the things that Jacob's talking about here, these are outrageous allegations to make about someone. Someone with zero credibility to the accusation, by the way, zero evidence. They're even made by people who would not be qualified to make a judgment like that about whether you are allowed to be in that area or not. Like, this is just a fucking guy with like a fucking badge. Like, he doesn't know anything about this. And what happens as a result of it, by the way? Does Riot ever come out publicly in a massive press conference that they love to fucking do when some player's getting in trouble, he's getting fined for saying naughty words in solo queue? Do they come out and apologise to Jacob and go, we apologise to award-winning, credentialed journalists within our space for our... No, they never do. What's supposed to happen is people like Jacob, if they want to work in the space, have to eat an endless buffet tray of shit sandwiches in the hopes that eventually one of them has peanut butter in. That's it. Like, there's never any reciprocity from Riot. Basically, and this goes in line, by the way, if everyone knows, an infamous, now almost fucking meme copy-pasta level tweet, but a real one, because this is what a joke these guys are. When Mark Merrill infamously made that tweet, where he actually congratulated I Will Dominate for getting to have a career in a game that he'd made. Implying, by the way, him just shitting out League of Legends, a bad Dota clone, just gave I Will Dominate a whole career as a fucking entertainer. Literally someone who takes your product product, makes it better just by being himself while fucking watching it, right? They basically, that's the mentality you've got to understand Riot has. They think that they're basically the kid who has all the fucking toys, and we're allowed round their house to play with the toys. But if we don't play the game exactly how they say, and all the rules they're making up, and all that we have to dance to their little jig, then we're out and we're cast out of the fucking kingdom, as it were. You have to be grateful at all times with Riot, basically, no matter what they do.
They also just confuse. I mean, this is a bigger problem in the esports scenes as a whole, but they confuse credibility with audience a lot of the time.
Sure.
Right. So I used to get, and ESPN in general used to get a ungodly amount of access from Riot Games. Right. I will be the first to admit we had a level of privilege because we were fucking ESPN. Right.
Sure.
Biggest sports media company in the world. But I would have to go do the very specific math, but I don't think this is a rough estimation. I'm pretty sure the League of Legends section on Dot Esports gets more traffic than ESPN Esports got in an entire month at one point, right? Like if you compare just the league section of .esports.com and all of ESPN Esports, there are times when that League of Legends section does more traffic. And that's because people come to Dot Esports to read about League of Legends, right? Like we're a credible League of Legends source. If you want to learn about the game, if you want to learn about the esports scene, you come read because we have everything, right? It's a very much a kind of daily digest kind of thing. And so like what's the benefit of like treating ESPN like they're, these giant gods and then treating places like Dot Esports like shit, right? Like there's nothing. You would get more out of
the corporate
treating sort of
hive
the
mind
endemic
recognizes the other corporate hive mind, and they synergize. I saw that a lot when I was working at Turner, and these brands have a kind of it's like they know what they recognize. It's like, I don't know, when vampires are kind of like walking among humans, right? And they all know, like, yeah, one of us. We'll give you all the special perks and privileges that a big corporation should have conferred unto them, as we would want it conferred unto us. Now, listen, guys, we're being a bit broad here, and I definitely want to get us back on track. That is to slay the mighty dragon. That is Travis Gafford's outrageous ego on this topic. And then I'm happy to talk about any
Let's do it then.
past transgression. So, as I said, the reason that this entire thing is being debated is that Travis Gafford, a man who leveraged a good deed into a career with no journalistic credentials or background that I know of, and went on to be essentially a corporate mouthpiece for years for this company, while doing it under the guise of, hey, I'm an independent journalist, y'all. And then whenever anyone called him out, he said, I don't like to use the J word, actually, not when there's, culpability for the things I do. This is what I mean about him being a jellyfish. But he put this out because he tried to make it look like he was rallying the troops, that he was the guy who was saying, I'm going to do a boycott, right? Like it even says in his title, my coverage is changing because of this outrageous new policy by Riot Games. A policy, remember, people are really glossing over this. A policy he was happy to play along with when he thought he would get the best answers in the quickest time and still be able to scoop his opposition with Riot approval. Now, one of the reasons I find it absolutely egregious that Travis Gafford would be the man to draw attention to this man has took a stand for nothing in his life. I mean, nothing. This is a man who has no backbone, no moral center. This is a man who's just happy to have money rolling in as much as he can and lead his California lifestyle, right? And get to talk about one of the most popular video games in the world. A serious journalist he is not. So I at least respect him for not having the outrageous attitude to use that word when describing himself. So
but he used to. But he used to, Rich. He used to. That's what bothers me.
At least he realizes now. So let's talk about Travis Gafford. What stand should you have taken? I was going to ask you when you were giving your story, Jacob, while you were getting hauled over the coals for the Rocks story. Did Travis Gafford say anything about this?
Of course he didn't. He actually
did he offer any support for you privately?
Actually in that event, what I remember kind of most distinctly about that Chicago event is that he was getting ton of access and no one else was. And he was constantly like in the corner of the media tent. We were right outside the theater in this like giant white tent. It was a ton of Chinese press, English press, right? I think EGG was still in was still in the quarters at that point. So a huge contingency from Asia, considering SKT, EDG, and Rocks were still in it. And he like it was almost like he was almost part of the Riot PR team in terms of the way he was interacting. Like those were his buddies, and those people, the people that were at that event, acting like that with him, they know that some of them still work at Riot, some of them do not, but none of them actually still work in Riot PR's department for the LCS and for esports, which is quite interesting now that there's some tension when all those people are gone.
Right.
But it was, I mean, he was like constantly in conversation with those people, sitting with those people, kind of on this like different plane than the rest of us in the way that he acted during that event. And that's what I remember. And so during the whole Rocks thing, you know, like I felt super alone. It took like a month to be vindicated for all of that. And there was a lot of press that like threw me under the bus or ignored me. And it felt like crap because a month later it came out I was right. But yeah, I mean, like that. What I was gonna say earlier, where I was kind of heading before we like dove into this like broader rabbit hole, is I've thought about like formalizing some sort of like collective body to go to Riot and just be like, here's kind of our expectation, right, of what we would like to see to cover League of Legends. And the problem I thought was like they could just say fuck you, we're going with Travis. Like that was the whole reason I like could never do that. I felt like we didn't have any leverage because they had a way to interact with the public that wasn't us.
So not only did Travis not take a stand on that, right? He didn't take a stand on Reddit at all, in fact. Now, Reddit is an interesting one because what I've come to realize is in my young, naive, ideological, purity, whatever the fuck days of 2014, before I realized just how much of a cesspool this business is. And actually, Reddit is like, I don't know, it's not even the fucking fleck of shit on top of the fucking pile of everything else. Like, it's actually not all that bad. In fact, it's par for the course now for a games developer to essentially control a subreddit. It's par for the course for companies like Epic Games to suppress people making genuine consumer complaints on Reddit. There was allegations of bribery of Reddit moderators. Reddit is just an astroturfed shithole. Nothing you see on Reddit is genuine. It's all manipulated. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, it is literally manipulated by these companies too. Like, I get told, here's some facts for you guys. I have been told directly by companies that they employ bots to generate positive comments. That they have hordes of people who will go in and like basically manipulate public opinion by posting on a variety of different accounts within threads or posting the content itself and upvoting it. Reddit is far from pure.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing is it's losing. For the good esports websites, and again, most of this are like the successful ones, recurring successful ones. Reddit is losing a lot of its power. You know, when Rich and I worked at Daily Dot and worked for the esports section 6 years ago, 5 years ago, it was king. They like dominated our month of referral traffic. It's not anymore. Google is actually
thankfully.
Google,
YouTube algorithm, God bless you.
If you go,
which is why they've got lax on all of the rules.
If you look at like Alexa website data for Dot and Dexerto, a lot of it is SEO traffic, which is good. It's another way to make revenue without having to rely on something that is wishy-washy as Reddit, because Reddit can really make or break a website.
So, and to give you guys an example, this channel that you're going to see this on YouTube, the Inside on Esports channel, used to get, if you were on the front page of Reddit towards the top, like you could get 50,000 views. Right now, even though many of the shows on this channel reach the front page of their respective subreddits, right now it's at 2% of the viewership. It's all organic or YouTube algorithm traffic right now, which is good in many ways.
Well, I mean, I had a big feature story, two big feature stories at the beginning of this year. One about Sky Williams and one about a guy named Joshua Mullins, this teenager who tried to scam people in esports for $42 million. One of these like holder stories of master forgery. And the Mullins story outperformed the Sky story. The Sky story was the top of the Smash Brothers Reddit, and the Mullins story had mostly Google referral traffic because it had TDK, Liquid, all of these like relevant teams that he tried to scam as a part of the story, right? Like that's because Google is a quite a powerful tool in a way that Reddit is not anymore. Thank God, because Reddit is way too wishy-washy.
So I'm just gonna list all of Travis's many crimes of silence, and then I'll bring Duncan in because you've had the dubious pleasure of working with him. So he didn't take a stand over Reddit moderators demanding to know sources directly from journalists, which goes to like Josh Raven, Jacob, William Turton, who just up and left, myself. Whenever we were like, "Hey, Travis,"
I think my last video was the same thing.
Yeah, whenever we were like, hey, hey, Travis, you're the big name.
Yeah.
You must have some opinion on this. Well, Reddit's a complicated business. Then when they banned his content or his content got deleted, he would go crying to anyone who would listen. Never took a stand for the collective, always took a stand for himself. Then when I got banned and unpersoned on Reddit in what is one of the most ridiculous things to ever happen, a complete fabrication tissue of lies orchestrated by seriously mentally ill people who, by virtue of having moderator status on a particularly large subreddit, thought they could get away with doing absolutely anything. And so didn't say anything about that. In fact, said, well, Richard, you are kind of an abrasive guy. He was happy to stand by and watch a journalist be censored. Also, conflict of interest. Not really something Travis Gafford seems to care too much about, is it? I mean, we all remember the fucking free hot tub holidays for Travi Gaff,
Jesus
right?
Christ!
Why
After the Chris Badawi story, by the way, the first one, which I was talking about that the other day. It was like 7 claims by 7 teams in that, and 2 of them were right. Cloud9 and Liquid were truthful, and all the
most
others
of them were
full
lies.
of shit. One of them, the Team Impulse one, was like, I just plain don't like the guy. I felt like I was playing Civilization 6 and being denounced like I just plain don't like turn 20. Like Jesus Christ. Like,
yep. So
my favorite one was TSM lying. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, didn't have a problem with any of that. Has never had a problem with Riot Games taking strong arm action against any of the journalists that we've talked about here. Certainly as well, and this is perhaps crucial to the bit that'll tee you up here, Duncan. This is a man who, by the way, has been happy to make agreements with Riot about what questions are broached to get the content that serves his needs. And I know this to be true because I would urge anyone to go and watch his blockbuster Frost Nixon style interview with Mark Merrill from December 18th, 2019. This was a year almost after revelations of systemic sexism and other atrocities inside Riot Games had been revealed. And it was up to Travis Gafford, investigative journalist extraordinaire, to sit down with the big man, Mark Merrill. Remember, Mark Merrill, a man who reportedly cried at a town hall in front of all of the women that his company had let down and said, I just feel like I could have done more. Because it's always about that narcissist, isn't it? It's always about him. I can see why him and Travis feel like kindred spirits in a lot of ways. So he sat down with Mark Merrill and put the video out on December 18th, 2019. And there's a question in there. One question. Diversity and inclusion issues at Riot. And you go, well, this will be juicy. Except it's not juicy. Except what actually happens is Travis says, I think it's great. Oh, it's so sickening to watch. I think it's great you're addressing these issues. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that process. And so,
a lot of softballs in this interview. Some of them are mad.
Some of them are almost
like, put it this way: there's a point in the interview where the joke would be Travis forgets he's on camera and starts trying to pretend he's the earpiece in Joe Biden's ear. Because at one point in time, right, Mark Merrill makes some outrageous comment like, does it really matter? You know what we did as well.
And then
I'm like, well, I think what you mean by that. You know, like, like he was playing defense with the guy.
Yeah, he literally did. He said, Mark Merrill said, I don't think it really matters what you say. And Travis Gafford went, when you said earlier that it doesn't matter, I mean, it does matter what you mean to say was. And he basically was the positive Kathy Newman. He came to his rescue.
It was the Key and Peele Obama anger translator. Like,
yes,
that's exactly what it was.
It was absolutely unfucking real, by the way. And so anyway, here's what I know about that interview. There are only two ways you sit down with Mark Merrill, and it's quite telling, by the way. I'm sure Travis had a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling every time Riot Games were in one of their many disasters and negative headlines. Who's the man they went to see? Travis Gafford. He thought that was a feather in his cap. It means you're a fucking bought and paid for shill, you stupid fucking cunt. And you should have been looking at in the mirror and asking yourself hard questions every time they wanted to sit down with you so you could disseminate their message. But you're too fucking greedy and too fucking short-sighted for that, which is why you're not sat here taking your licks like anyone else would. You are a fucking narcissist posing as a journalist. So what he did was he basically must have either agreed that we won't go too hard on the woman stuff, right? In which case you have actively engaged in the process you are now decrying, or you didn't have the backbone to ask the hard questions, in which case you are not fit for fucking purpose as a fucking journalist. So, spiel over for Travis Gafford, hot tub meta pioneer, to fucking sit and talk about how it's wrong a Riot and how he's going to take the stand for all his other journalists. You never took a stand once. The only person you stand for is your fucking self. That and trust me, as I said, I always held back a little bit out of respect, but me and him aren't the same. We don't do the same thing. We don't have the same goals. So no, what is the point of holding back and respecting what he does? He is a blight. He is the manifest horror of access journalism if you don't check it early. Right.
Yeah, and while I agree with his points that he made in the video about pre-submitting questions, I agree with them wholeheartedly. I agree with basically everything that he said within this video, and I think he's right. I also, Richard, the problem with Travis is that what investigative journalists do is that they are duty and honor bound to a code of ethics, right? That is bigger than themselves. And what's so suspicious is that Travis has always behaved in a way that shows that he has no basically ethical center or moral compass whatsoever. And so it's very difficult to trust him or in any capacity at this point in time for all the reasons that you've stated. Whereas, I'm sitting here with four esports journalist of the year awards between the three of you, right? And so you all have very clear ideas about what is the moral center that you're going after. And you may disagree on certain points, but at least there is that guiding light that makes you trustworthy because you are accountable to your own ethical compass. And I think that's what's missing with Travis. And that's fine. If he doesn't want to be a journalist, then don't be a journalist. But you can't simultaneously do these interviews and then try and break news that is supposed to be objective, right? Because it calls that news into question, even though I think in this instance, he's right. It does make me wonder if he's telling the whole truth in many ways, or what his motivation is for doing that, because it doesn't seem to adhere to some sort of higher power. And my other issue with it was that we alluded to earlier, is that he himself has engaged in these practices. And when I mentioned this on Twitter, a lot of people were saying, well, it's not the same, Monty. This is a corporation and it's his show and he can do what he wants. Well, it's Riot's company. It's their product. They can do what they want. So that logic doesn't apply. But also, it's the same principle, because we have to talk about why you don't pre-submit questions for those people who don't know this. And it's because if you are a trusted person within the scene of an esport or a sport or in the circle of journalism, people recognize that you have a certain level of professionalism. And what happened was I wanted to go on a show that Jacob was on, which was Hotline League. And I wanted to ask a Riot employee who no longer works at Riot some questions. And the Riot employee said I could come on the show. And Travis was engaging with me for an hour or more saying, I need you to pre-submit your questions, because he didn't want me to ask stuff on the air. And I kept telling him, look, if I say something that's stupid, I'm going to look stupid. Okay, this is my reputation, not yours. You're just going to be sitting there, man. The only thing you're going to get out of this is clicks for your content, right? But he didn't want to bite the hand that fed him, or have me bite it in that case, which, by the way, I was not going to do, because I didn't want to make a big deal out of this. I had some real questions about the LCS that I wanted to ask. He was afraid I was going to ask, dig into this guy. But honestly, show me one time in my entire career where I have done that directly to a person where we are on a mutual ground, where we're having a discussion. I'm not unreasonable to people. I'm professional in those environments. I understand. It's not like it's the same thing. Like as much as I've complained about Riot's actions, have I ever done it on a League of Legends broadcast? No, I haven't, because it's not the time for it, right? I'm a professional at the end of the day. I reserve that for my own content, for my own social media, and I leave the broadcast where it deserves to be, which is alone and free of that material.
Nothing. It's fealty.
I know, but and the other thing is that Travis, as he always does, he's done this to Thorin too, is that he will delete the content after the fact that he doesn't like, and he deleted. So he let me on the show after the former Riot employee
mine's gone by the way. My appearance on Hotline League, where context, Hunter Lay, the whatever his position is, GM of Golden Guardians or SVP of Esports at Golden Guardians, whatever his official title is. Ex-Rider, worked at GameSpot before that.
Boss.
This was Chopper. This was Riot.
No. I was saying in my case.
Oh, okay.
Hunter was on the show. It was after his first split as running Golden Guardians, and he went on and just laid into his coaching staff, laid into his players, blamed High like super hard for being a terrible in-game leader, yada yada yada. Just flamed his own team after they performed poorly in their first split. So Mark Z brought me onto the show, and I said, okay, like my first thing out of the gate was like, Hunter, how are you qualified to have this job? You've never done team management your entire life. How are you qualified to have this job? Shouldn't you accept some blame for this, right? You put this team together. You put this staff together. You hired your buddies, Spellsy and others, right, to manage this team, and they failed. Shouldn't you accept some blame? You ran this thing. And like after the show, like Travis was like, I hate Jacob, yada yada yada, and I went looking for that VOD the other day, and it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah,
because I went on.
You
and
mean
said
he's
that.
actively censoring content that's not favorable to the viability of his broadcast? Wow, crazy.
But he deleted the first episode that he did with Thorin that spawned Summoning Insight in the first place. When Thorin went on and challenged him about a bunch of stuff, he deleted the part of Hotline League where I went on afterwards and basically complained on his show to him and Mark and said, "Hey, this isn't right. This isn't good journalistic ethics. I just wanted to have a reasonable conversation about stuff I was curious about in the LCS. I wasn't trying to entrap this person or make myself look bad, right?" So I don't really understand it. It goes against the kind of common practices where you can't respect someone else. And I also said to Travis, I would never do this to you in a million years. Like anybody can come on the show and say whatever the fuck they want. I don't care. I'm not Jacob, you weren't pre-screened for what you were going to say. We'll never do that. But
no, and by the way, me and Duncan are very notably at odds on some things. And look, and we're here being professional. We're having a conversation. It's fine. It's fine. You can disagree with
he
people.
Is worryingly quiet, Jacob. That should,
no, but Duncan, am I wrong? Am I wrong? Like, am I wrong? Like, we're at odds on some things.
Yeah, you should obviously be able to put minor things behind you, sure.
Yeah, but when push comes to shove, right? When Monty asked me to come on the show, I didn't I was just like, okay. Fine, this is an important topic. We can talk
Jacob,
about
you're not
this.
a coward, and I admire that about you. So, and also, it's also like obviously, we're capable of having a reasonable conversation, which is the purpose of the show. So my point is like, and I don't care. Maybe Travis was like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that, right? That was a shitty thing for me to do. I learned from this. Then all he has to do is say like, I did this previously. I'm sorry to Monty. I don't agree with this anymore. I learned from that experience, and then we just all move on with our lives.
He was running the same shit with me. I wanted to get him on the podcast.
He's actually incapable of saying he's wrong.
He wanted a pre-meeting before the podcast. He was going to come on the Richard Lewis show. I even consider if I have you on a podcast, it says two things. It says, I think you've got something interesting to say, and that our conversation could be interesting. And that it's also kind of an olive branch that like, I'm never going to platform someone who I think is like completely morally fucking repugnant. So, and this was a few years ago. So, or a couple, I don't know. And so I was like, I wanted to get him on, and he just kept giving me the runaround and go, can we have a meeting? Can we talk about the show before the show? And I'm like, you can't be fucking serious that you're saying this now. Like he is just image obsessed. He wants to be the guy with the mic in his hand on TV, everyone looking at him, thinking he's cool, but he's got none of the chops to do it. He's not even a particularly good interviewer. Like, he's not a particularly charismatic guy. You know, he doesn't have he doesn't ask hard-hitting questions. I've never understood the fascination, frankly. And when I said he leveraged a good deed into a career, let's be clear, that is exactly what he did. That is exactly what he did. It was a time when you could do stuff like that. And if the community liked you and you blew up on Reddit, you got away with it. I mean, fuck, man. Even D-Man leveraged fucking Reddit to get himself a job.
It is very much first. It's a first movers policy, right? Like, I don't think he's like the worst interviewer in the world, but I don't think he's as good as Ashley Kang, right? Or like someone of the cut, right? Like, I think
Ashley Kang is just a multilingual Travis Gafford. So I guess
Ashley has a lot. Knowing her, she has a lot more standards than Travis, which I appreciate.
She watches the game a lot more, I'll tell you that much. You know, she's putting in the time to try and know what she's talking about. I'm not always
she plays the same game with pandering to people who would actively harm journalism, though.
It's that element, for sure.
As long as her content can be on the front page, she'll let every other journalist fucking burn in the Hades of non-access to those Reddit moderators.
There was some tension with Riot. There was some tension with Riot and MSI and Damwon recently, which you saw her post a little bit about, and I thought that was like the whole scheduling thing where they gave RNG the first play day when Damwon was supposed to, and I think she handled that fairly well, better than he would have, frankly.
Okay.
In the same position. But I mean, there are a lot of other people that are better interviewers than him, but he was here first. Right, like, and I mean, hell, we're streaming. We're
with a super popular player.
Yeah,
God.
And well, we're streaming on a platform that has a lot of issues that also gets a lot of first movers bonus. Right, Twitch has a lot of problems, but is successful partly because they were first to do it.
Yes. Let me do my little rant then.
Yeah,
so basically,
there you go.
I don't have like a million like super secret stories or anything like that. Like, I don't actually have that big a personal issue with Travis. Like, if you notice, I've very rarely ever fired shots at him. I'll do the odd joke on like a talk show, but yeah, that's just grist for the mill, isn't it? Anyone can get in on that. The reason why I don't tend to typically attack him publicly is just because I thought generally Travis, first of all, because he did work with me, he's been generally smart enough to just sort of stay in his lane and not try and veer into my domain when I'm in the League of Legends journalism world. He just stays in his lane and does his interviews and posts his videos when he has his problems. But I've always, and even when I knew him as a colleague, I would have considered him certainly an acquaintance, someone I've met up many times with. I've always been very, very disappointed by his refusal to actually like uphold standards across the rest of the industry that don't just involve his literal bottom line that fucking day. Because he won't stand for anyone. You basically have to be his best friend, as far as I can tell, before he'll fucking take any form of stand in your half. And even then, by the way, you probably have to be one of his friends that literally depend on him like for their fucking livelihood. Like, their content goes on his channel. He got them the interviews. He's the one who made them by getting like. There's also that element which I've never been a huge fan of personally, because it's one thing when you help someone and you almost tell them like, look, I've helped you now. You know, just go out. Don't bother thanking me for it. Just take it. Go do what you want. When you always sort of keep them on the hook of like, yeah, but I made you. Like, I've always thought there's something sinister behind the scenes there. So here's what I'll say is this, right? I think of all the incidents over history. There was the one with Jacob and the whole Rocks Tigers thing. You don't even have to know anything about that situation. I made a video about exactly this topic, which said I'd heard similar stories like a certain team and NA's probably signing this player. So I knew it was possible that these players could be going. But the point of my video essentially was just if you appreciate the very premise of like journalistic integrity and the editor system where they have to like verify that you actually have the fucking sources, in theory, you can trust that. I don't need to know the specifics of who the people are. I just have to know that they're doing this particular method and that this is different from just anyone putting a story out. So the idea, as it was alluded to back then, that like fucking forget Riot and the rest of them, like Reddit mods should have any say in whether it was just a legitimate source or not. Like, not nonsense stuff. All someone like Travis has to do there, by the way, is just do a simple tweet. Doesn't even have to be what Jake, could be what the premise. Just do a retweet of a tweet and somewhat simple. Just show that you at least agree with the premise. Like, they're not just going to silence people. Then there was obviously the one, like Richard said, with Loco Doco, where even though Loco to this day has never said anything because he pussied out by going, well, I've got an NDA, but as soon as that's up, and then he magically just left League of Legends when that was up. So you'll never get the real story of that. I'll give you the gist though. Basically, Loco made like a very, very mildly off-color sexual joke in a context which almost directly asked for it. The person receiving this question / answer was just sort of like, okay, didn't see anything wrong with it, but I basically heard Riot and potentially even Travis and other people were just like outraged, literally clutching clothes on behalf.
He compared.
Oh my god, what's going on here? Yeah, go on.
If I remember right, because I reported on the story when he was fired, the joke
He wasn't
was
fired.
that
He was his
or
access was removed.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
well, because he was working for Golden Guardians at the time. That was in the same cloth.
Yes.
Because he was doing a piece of interview content with Riot, if I remember right, and I think he's in the
I think
chat.
sounds right. Yeah.
If I remember right, the joke was that a mic sock, one of these, right?
Yeah.
Was that he thought the first time he saw it in Korea or something that it was a condom. That was the joke.
That's how mild we're talking, by the way. And this was literally treated, by the way,
Something like
as
that.
he'd made some like outrageous sexual remark to a woman, like, oh, I'd like to fuck you off the. That was like the level it was presented on. Because it's another thing Riot always does, by the way. When they fuck you completely over the most petty minor thing, they'll purposely leave it as vague as possible so people could read the most heinous shit into what you're doing. Meanwhile,
when we reported that, by the way, when we reported on that, I was like super tactile in the words, right? Like. In terms of like nobody said he harassed anyone, nothing.
Okay.
Made a sexual remark. That's it.
Yes.
Right? Like that was it. No harassment or something.
By the way.
Yeah, but people like did spin it. You're right. People did spin it to be a lot worse. That he sexually harassed someone or that like whatever, which he didn't.
But that's another thing. That's another thing.
Riot are the ones making a judgment about that as well. I mean, it's fucking reeling it. No, here's the other thing I was going to say though, because what's outrageous is these are just easy ones to take a stand on. Like I say, even though he does know all the people involved, you don't even have to know the people. You just look at it and go, "This is an obvious fucking injustice, abuse of power, and sets a terrible precedent for the industry." Which, spoiler, I work in as a fucking journalist. But because Travis thinks he is the made man, because he thinks he is hooked into the Riot fuckboy network, he imagines he will always be the one who's allowed to get away with this, even though, by the way, it ignores a basic premise of human psychology, which is whenever you have a group that is based around some fucked up premise of purity, as you narrow down the group and kick out the ones that are impure, now the one at the edge just becomes the one on the fringe. Inevitably, why they all literally every one of these revolutions ends with them all shooting each other in the side of the fucking head. It's just the way it goes. So the sad thing is this, right? Then you add this in. Not only does Travis do all that, but as Richard and Monty just told a story here, that he directly went out of his way to give them just enough rope to believe they could be on his show, as though, again, they should be grateful they can appear on his fucking platform. But then also treated them like they had to like crawl through fucking like an Andy Dufresne type shit tunnel for 2 miles to prove themselves worthy to be on his mighty podcast. Meanwhile, here's a detail for you, Richard. The Reddit mod, his name is Tom Shoe. I don't make the fucking names up. You put your name on the internet, dickhead. I assume that's a fucking alias. This guy, Tom Shoe, who's a top Reddit mod, who bragged about being the one who removed my video about Alfari and the whole Jat situation. But reason given, the real reason from Reddit mods was that it had like basically like allegations that hadn't been confirmed by like confirmed sources. So essentially, they just want me to tell them who my sources are. Otherwise, I'm not allowed to have the video. By the way, whatever. If that's the way they want to do it, this same guy, are you ready for the ultimate punchline of all time, guys? He is apparently someone who regularly calls in to Hotline League and is allowed to appear. There's the joke. So, like I said before about how it's the other way around, I'm going to treat Riot with contempt based on what they've done in this industry. Travis wants to tell Richard and Monty, I don't think you're really ready enough to join the big boys table and come onto my show.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that? A corrupt Reddit mod who's a piece of shit? Lying all the time. Yeah, just come on, mate. You just say whatever you feel like, yeah.
Yeah, well, just one thing as well. Like I said, I didn't want to say it when I was listing all of his sins, but like Jacob and Duncan and maybe Monty as well can clarify this. The way I remember the Loco Doco thing was that when Loco Doco was accused, and I didn't report on it because by that point I was like,
you were out.
Waste of time. But I remember hearing exactly that he just said, "Oh, he thought it was a condom or something," and that was as far as it went. But then it was the person he'd said it in front of that was supposedly the one we were protecting was absolutely okay with it.
She was not okay. She was not mad. Yeah.
Yes.
But Travis took it upon himself to drive the outrage internally. And I had a number of people tell me this. Oh, you'll never guess your old friend Travis is up to this. So again, put that in the context of what we're talking about here. Travis, why my approach to coverage is changing. This guy actively leveraged a nothing burger to eliminate a potential competitor. Fuck you. You don't get to talk about journalism, buddy. You don't get to talk about journalistic ethics. You have none.
Oh, I had one more thing to
I
say before I forget, which just goes like this. The other thing I really despise about his like approach to journalism and this is like he doesn't fucking do disclaimers. Here's the thing: the reason I'll always bang on about disclaimers is they're easy as fuck. So, for example, does everyone like that tool called ProView in League of Legends where you can watch all the players moving and their clicks? Right? I actually have some of the shares in that company. Now, has that ended the whole segment? Is everyone just tuned out? Is no one going? No, it's like that one second just means I've got literally a complete disclaimer out there that you understand what my self-interest is in telling you that's a good program. Now, hopefully, you also would think I'm a legitimate individual and wouldn't just say that because of a financial interest. But by saying it, I also just get it out the way. You can account for my bias, right? Travis, almost his fucking Rolodex of friends is a who's who of corrupt crony fucking nepotism in the esports industry. So he's best pals with Hunter Lay, the person that you just talked about earlier, Jacob, who was literally our stand-in boss while our real boss was doing fucking benders in the Mile High Club, snorting more than fucking people who were like would be extradited from Colombia. This guy was just the stand-in boss. He then works for Golden Guardians. Now, when Travis is interviewing from Golden Guardians, does he ever bother mentioning stuff like, by the way, you weren't my boss in the past? No. Why the fuck would he mention that? He wouldn't want you to know.
No. They were roommates, Duncan. Even better. They lived together.
And then
also.
Think about how many times on his fucking content he's had Nick Allen, literal friend of his, rioter, CLG employee. Fuck, how many things has this cocksucker not been involved in? Again, when you do these interviews, you must literally stress at key moments when it's a question that would be related to this. Like, you, of course, did work for Riot previously. You have to do that. If you don't do it, you are literally a joke. You are like that fucking classic George Orwell quote, like, journalism is printing what other people don't want printed. Everything else is just public relations. You're just public relations, Travis.
Also,
Nick
Hunter
Allen was
Lee
out there standing for Taylor Lorenz as well. By the way, sorry, Christopher, jump in.
We'll just say
So just one out on the record.
I will give Nick Allen credit for one thing. He does have, and this is real, one of the funniest tweets of all time. He has a tweet that does say something.
Yes.
It's real. It's from 2011. It just says, like, I see Bitcoin's not even made it to $2 a pop. Glad I didn't get it on that shit.
Yeah.
It
is really funny.
I was in it, but that was fucking perfect. Just too good.
So about Hunter Lee too, you have to remember that he used to work for Riot for League Ops, right? And so that's the other problem is that the when Golden Guardians was formed and he went over, because I believe the sequence was he worked for On Gamers, right? Well, yeah, and then he worked for Riot.
Yep.
Yeah, and then he worked for Golden Guardians.
So he went directly, I believe, from Riot to Golden Guardians, which is like it's like when and
they recommended him for that job by that way. The big reason he got that job, as I understand, is he already lived in the Bay Area. So he left Riot. There was a period of a couple months where he left Riot to move to the Bay Area to be with his family. Right, they're based in the Bay Area. They recommended for him the job. When the Warriors got in, he got the job. That's the sequence of events.
And what's so interesting about this is it's like, you know, when a government official goes and like joins a lobbyist organization right afterwards or joins a private company that is then, you know, discussing with the government and has all the connections over there. Also, suspiciously, Hunter Lee was the one who fired Loco Doco. You know?
That's right. That's right.
So they recommend him for this position. And anyway, it just gets all so incestuous, but this stuff is just never... It's never reported on for some reason.
Yeah.
The guy who's the main fucking reporter in the game is involved directly in all this shit. They're his mates. He's literally turning Monty and going, shall I just drop dime on all your... Nah, fuck it, let's just go with double lifting this karaoke now. Fuck, and then, like, literally, by the way, when he did those interviews we referred to earlier, where he was in Hawaii, I believe it was Hawaii, right? With Team Liquid and a bunch of other people. He's doing interviews with them. Literally, every one of those interviews, my dude, has to start with, and I was flown here by Team Liquid. Thanks to them for that. You know, this is essentially like an unofficial sponsored segment.
Yeah.
No, of course not. Let's just do interviews with people about their teams, you know, how competent they are at their jobs, what players they've signed, while they're in, you're basically literally being, and by the way, think about any other field in the world. People go crazy when like a politician gets like a donation to his charity, when a fucking, a doctor gets one of those gift baskets with the fucking $250 champagne and the caviar. This guy's doing shit like that on an esports interview level. He's not even in some massive fucking field. He's literally signing out for fuck all just to get he was doing a hot tub 5 years ahead of everyone else, this cunt.
What maybe bothers me most about that specific moment, by the way, is when like Richard and Sam Lingle and I like called that shit out 6 years ago. It was I was the +1 of someone else who was on this trip. They did not invite me directly. That doesn't make it any better.
No,
it doesn't make it any better.
I was simply brought to wallow in the opulence.
I know.
Are you not able to just say no? Right? Like
you can't even make this shit up, man.
This was ESPN's rule, and I've just lived by it the rest of my career since working there. ESPN's rule was anything more than $75 as a gift, you have to say no to. So like, somebody can buy me lunch, that's fine. But if they buy me a fucking computer, I have to send it back, or I have to donate it to charity. I got a box from Riot once full of just like all this shit, bunch of hardware and everything, and I took it to the Disney charity office on the ESPN campus and handed them all of it. It was like, please get rid of this, send it to charity. And it all went to charity. Because like, and it's just like, but he's taking a vacation to Hawaii. And he's like, I'm the +1. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It makes no difference. You say no. Like, that's just what you do.
That's why the Timo hats meme was so good. The Reddit moderators were like, yeah, we took gifts from Riot staff, probably in exchange for favorable moderation. But it was only Timo hats. Yeah, then you're a dickhead. You had a position of leverage and you sold out for a fucking novelty hat. You fucking morons. Yeah, mind blowing. Esports, baby.
All right. I'm gonna say. Okay, go, Jacob.
I just want to say this one thing. The one thing that no one actually has really noticed about Travis more recently, and what bothers me even more because it's so recent, and we're talking about this video. Travis has a new podcast with Emily Rand on Spotify. Guess whose deal that is with Spotify? Guess who puts that? Yeah, Riot. Riot has a multi-year deal with Spotify for exclusive content. And Travis is a co-host of this.
You mean Travis has a direct business interest for Riot, Jacob? I can't believe that.
Basically, analogy. Richard, the analogy is this. Travis doesn't have a problem with the fact that to essentially work on Riot-sponsored events, you must be part of a human centipede. He just disagrees what order he should be within it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I think The Human Centipede is the hottest movie ever made.
There you go.
Okay. This is the last call. I'm ringing the bell. This is the last call for more on Travis. Anyone have anything else in their system? Because if not, I do want to move on to some more of the press policies.
Yeah. I just think, as I said, I think there is, as much as we want to talk about Riot and their fucked up policies, there's something more fucked up that's gone on, and that is that we elevate people under the guise of journalism in esports generally because it's a young industry full of kids who don't know better. And while I do despise a lot of esports communities because of the naivety, stupidity, hive mind nature of them, the one thing I'll give the League of Legends community credit for is, since the game came out in 2009, 2010, they didn't even know what an opinion piece was. They didn't know what reportage was. Yeah. They thought roster moves were like some huge secret taboo and definitely weren't official until it was confirmed by the org. And then you look at where we're at now, where it's actually a huge, exciting part of the off season. And, you know, I'll say that it's been great to watch them get it.
It's matured. It's matured. Yes, even like what I was talking to you guys before we went on air about the Rainbow Six thing with the Invictus Gaming coach gig last week and how we were being flamed for reporting that someone was arrested. True, by the way. I felt like I was living League of Legends 4 years ago.
Yes.
When I was just like getting absolutely berated for, I remember being told how inappropriate I was for reporting on Doublelift's brother murdering his mother and attacking his father when I had police reports for all of it from the Orange County Police Department. And I waited for 3 hours for Doublelift to make a statement. I was very respectful to Doublelift in that entire situation, which is what bothered me even more. Right? Like that's what bothered me even more. But the league community is matured. That would be seen as normal and a normal part of journalism now because it is. And that's what's like, the league community has grown up a lot.
But to the point I'm making, unfortunately, there's no sort of taking it back when you elevate people that aren't. Look, if Travis was honest with himself, Travis would tell you, I only care about me. I will never starve a
Yep.
single day to tell the truth. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with saying I want to stave off starvation and all that. But unfortunately, you're doing it under the guise of a business. It's a code. You tell the truth, no matter what it costs you, and you must be willing to go to the extremes. Which is why people like me and Duncan, we seem like extreme characters. Yes, because we've been on those fringes. What a lot of the youngsters don't understand is esports was unbelievably cutthroat. It's soft now. It's pussy shit now. But it was unbelievably cutthroat when we were coming up. That one negative story as a journalist, people threatened to cast you out, and that meant all your money went away, your rent went away. You literally could be on the streets, destitute, or worse, have to go and get a real job. And so people, that was what we were willing to do, and that's why we have that weird love-hate relationship. Travis wouldn't do that. He would never do that. He would never dream of that. He'll do whatever suits him. So, and unfortunately, I look at esports journalism today, and I see that new breed coming through. Because there is no hardship and there is no cutthroat nature to it.
The new breed is, I work with Bloop every day, and he's great. Bloop is amazing. I think he'll be. I mean, he's 18, reminds me a lot of myself, but thank God, dude. Like you did a lot for me at the beginning of my career, Richard, in terms of not just what you did for me personally,
you were doing it for me,
but not just what you did for me personally, but also what you did for the community, right? Because you dealt with a lot of the early shit. Then I dealt with a lot of the shit too for the first 3.5 years of my career. Now people like Bloop are accepted, right? Like he's a favorite of the community because he does good journalism. And he's an accepted entity, which I'm really happy about. He'll never have to go through what either of us went through, at least in League. Maybe if he does stories in another community, he faces the same, but he'll never have to do what we went through. But the problem is at the very beginning of my career, 6-7 years ago, people were saying to me, you don't do things the way Travis does them. And it bothers the living hell out of me because I had to talk to team owners. I've had lunch with every LCS team owner, right? Even some of the billionaires that bankroll them. I've met these people, either had a drink or had a lunch with them. And I've had a really hard, level set, off the record conversation about journalism, the importance of it in this industry and why it's important, why I do what I do, to some of the most contentious people who treated me and Richard like shit at the beginning of our careers. Right. And when Richard started reporting on League and when I got into this,
for some of us, mate.
Yeah, fair. Beginning of my career in your time covering League, and I've had to have that level set conversation, but those relationships started with you don't do things the way Travis does them, as if that was like he does them the right way and you don't, and I don't like it. And that's a really hard 8 ball to start behind, right? Like I have to start behind that and fix it. And it took a lot of work, and it's really, really dangerous to our community. And it's frustrating.
Yep. So we can leave it all there. That is the grand roast of Travis Gafford. By the way, all for nothing. He will still enjoy the same status he enjoys. I just hope if it just makes 1 or 2 people see through the outrageous level of hypocrisy this guy engages in on a daily basis, and how he is actually not an arbiter of all things good about journalism, but actually one of the things good journalists have to work against. Fine. My job is done. It won't be my problem. But yeah, please stop creating these fucking monsters, man.
Okay, so I agree with everything that was discussed. I'm glad we had that conversation. I do want to move it on, though, to the press policies and unpack the good video that Travis made and kind of talk about some of these things. Because for me, pre-submitting the questions is a really interesting tactic. And I want to speak more broadly about what Riot's doing and why they might be doing that, because it's very odd to have these pre-submitted questions, especially to league officials, which is unlike most sports, especially when in any kind of press conference, anyone can just say, I'm not going to answer that question right now if you don't want to answer the question, right? Or we'll have an announcement about that in X amount of time. So unfortunately, we're kind of left to some very weird conclusions, which is either the people that are making these decisions, for whatever reason, are incapable of reacting appropriately for Riot on camera in the moment without any kind of preparation, or I think this is the more likely answer, is that especially messaging around LCS has gotten so out of control from Riot's perspective that they feel they need to clamp down. I mean, beyond the broad things about, the company and their various scandals that Riot has gone under for, all the lawsuits and everything that we've talked about previously, but also just about LCS right now. I mean, I think it's a really difficult position for them to be in. Now, I don't agree with the way they are dealing with it by not having the real league officials come out and speak openly and deal transparently with the problems. But, we had a Four Horsemen episode about the potential removal of region locking, and this is what this is what prompted Travis's video, was him submitting this question, pre-submitting this question about the removal of region locking, which was kind of semantically dodged, that he points out, and he then tried to ask a follow-up about changing region locking, which, by the way, I would be very surprised if at the end of this year region locking was not changed so that all minor regions now count as residents. So besides the 4 major regions, I think that's probably what's going to happen if I had to guess. But
probably for all leagues, by the way.
Yes, for all leagues. Yeah,
I would
of course.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah, for all leagues, but really it only benefits NA is the answer. They're doing something that technically benefits everybody, but in practice really only benefits North America. Maybe Europe and Turkey to some extent, but we won't get into that.
Which, by the way, I think because that's North America, there are some legitimate reasons for that other than trying to favor the North American owners and their power, right? I mean, part of that is I think the NA league player base as a whole, right, including like up and coming pros that could feed into your amateur system, I think the North American player base is not in a very good spot. Generally.
And here's just objectively what is going on. LCS viewership isn't great right now compared to what it was in the past. We're no longer getting, a few years ago, CLG versus TSM was 400,000 concurrents. It's not that shape anymore. They're losing control of the narrative. And I think this is really what is bothering them, is because of the rise of co-streaming, you have a bunch of people who basically are controlling the narrative of the hardcore fans to a ludicrous degree right now, where they can say, oh, this region is so bad, and the LCS was getting a lot of negative coverage, which then affects their viewership, it affects their sponsors. And so I think that this was an overreaction, if I had to guess, to a hell of a lot of negativity and bad press that Riot was experiencing, and this transition is them trying to get themselves back on the right track in terms of PR. That's my
I think
guess.
It's both at the same time. Like, for example, I do think, by the way, because it's just Riot's MO if you see them, they don't seem like they trust anyone except themselves to just act like a normal human being, because they have such ridiculous ideas of what storyline they want you to keep with and what not to address, that, like, I don't think they trust Monty, even like certain officials of LCS, to say the messaging correct and, hit the correct topic points. And then the point about, like, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say games PR in general is overly conscious in a way that is, or like overly conscious to that and protective in a way that's very unhealthy. I think like we can all kind of talk about dealing with PR people over the years, like at all companies, they're all very overprotective. And I think it's really terrible having dealt with some of the sports PR people that exist in some of these esports teams now, because they work in sports, basketball, football, whatever, right? And they own an esports team. Way more amenable than the people that work traditionally in games.
The problem you got with American companies and the PR people that they send out is they all fucking jerk off at night about how they're going to work in politics one day and live out.
Very weird stepping stone to politics.
Trust me, dude. Like the whole tech Silicon Valley computing thing, starting
so
PR, they think they're going to get there. They really believe it. They think one day they're going to be coming out and like talking to a journalist and going, yes.
I think they're going to be Jen Psaki.
Yeah,
like
Joe Biden.
They've
seen the West Wing. Yeah, and they think, Joe Biden on his 50th term. Yeah, cybernetic Joe Biden will fucking take your question now, It's like some mad fantasy they all have. So they're all
I was just going to say, I actually do think, I have gotten to know and interviewed him many times, Chris Greeley, for example, right? Like Chris Greeley's not an idiot. He understands semantics, right? Like he understands how to phrase something if he's asked a question. He knows how to say no I'm not going to answer that, right? I did a panel with South by Southwest at South by Southwest a couple years ago with Chris Greeley, and I said to him, I say this to a lot of these guys actually. The year before that, I was supposed to do a panel. I was supposed to do a panel with Nate Nancer, and it got pulled out from under me because I reported a story on Blizzard at the time and their struggles on expansion in February. South by came around in March, and I was no longer interviewing Nate. And then the year, but I still was able to have him in the Longhorn Network studio, ESPN studio. And I said to Nate, and I said this to Chris a year later, whatever you do, no matter what I ask on this stage or on this interview, don't lie. If you want to dodge my question, if you want to tell me you don't want to answer something, fine. Say that. That's okay. I'm not going to get angry with you for saying that, but do not lie. And that's all I say that. Preface before we go live or go on a stage or whatever with these people. They're not stupid. Chris Green was a really smart dude. He's a former lawyer, practicing lawyer, sports lawyer in the New York metro area. He knows how to say no. He knows how to avoid a question, right, without lying. He's not an idiot, but like sometimes I definitely see where Riot PR is overly protective of someone like him, highly educated.
I know,
right?
exactly.
Like, there's no
talked
need
to Chris.
To be. There's no need to
I don't have a bad opinion of Chris, and I think he's doing the job that needs to be done in terms of presenting the like. There are some unpopular things, that sometimes have to be presented, and he does that. But at the same time, like, we have to ask why is there this weird pre-submitted medium and then filtered through somebody asking PR to these people? Because Riot appears to think that's necessary, and that's what's confusing to me is why they think it's necessary.
Here's my answer. Basically, I think it is the second part, which is that this is the problem. There is no reasonable human being that, like, as soon as you tell me all that, well, he's actually an intelligent person and, he can speak for himself and he can say, no, that's why Riot doesn't want him in front of a camera answering a question by someone like me or Richard. Because what they're scared of is that he actually will be the guy who believes he's legit and he'll try to actually answer a question, which if you're Riot is certain death. Like, for example, they don't want you to ask a pro player in the LCS, does the spring split actually matter? Now, you could get a load of amazing opinions about that. You get a lot of silly ones and a lot of, they don't want the question to exist. Therefore, we cannot postulate the premise. They don't want even the concept to exist.
Think how that would go over with the sponsors, Duncan. You see.
There you go. There's one element to this as well. There's one element to this as well that people will be missing as well, which is when Monty there was like, I don't mind this Chris Green guy. I think he seems like a piece of shit. I think the way that he quite blatantly, as a reprisal against Travis for daring to speak out, went out of his way to uncharitably. Imagine being a cocksucker who works for Riot as a mouthpiece. You're talking about uncharitable interpretations of stuff. Should we talk about what your mates are up to in your fucking office, son? Because I can get uncharitable as a motherfucker. I'm like the reverse fucking Mother Teresa. Now, here's the thing, right? When they did this, no one in the entire world of functional adults thought Travis was reporting that the LCS owners had a meeting and did an official vote which overruled everything the player union does. No human being thought that. That premise is a ludicrous straw man that was constructed as a conceit by Chris Greeley, as far as I can tell, just to imply that Travis is a fucking clown. He is, but not in that particular way, who doesn't even understand the semantics of his own mother tongue, and therefore inappropriately said that like an official function
to be fair,
which in Travis's own video it showed they didn't think that. Like, none of that could be true.
To be fair, Travis used the word vote in his headline. That was his fucking downfall. He legitimately, in his YouTube video headline and in his tweet, he used the word vote, which they didn't vote. So, like, I agree. If you watch the whole video, sure, he says kind of like he goes into more detail, but like, dude used the word vote and he shouldn't have. That was my critique. And then he hid behind the I'm not a journalist, which again is like super problematic.
That goes up.
But using the word vote is just bullshit.
It's not really his fault, Jacob, because how could he possibly know that accuracy matters for journalists?
I mean, fair, but yeah, he used the word vote. In that case, because I said something to Travis and people were like, "Oh, the road." Like Dom is in the chat, I think, in your Twitch chat, and he like Twitch or was like stirring the pot on this one. But yeah, like Travis used the word vote. Don't use the fucking word vote. Learn your the way you communicate things is a part of journalism.
But at the same time, I mean, I can tell you from my own information, and I'm sure most of us probably can, that these conversations are ongoing about what to do with Academy.
Yes. And EU just, I know just legitimately voted it out, right? Like that, there was a real vote in Europe to get rid of it. But like, so the sentiment is not wrong. right? Like, I think there are some LCS owners that want to keep Academy. I don't think it's all of them. I think it's a mischaracterization to say it's all 10 of them, right? Or all 10 orgs. But to say the majority of them have that sentiment, that's not wrong. To say that they voted on something, that is wrong.
Yeah, and also I think he's, Greeley is right to say like they can't just unilaterally vote this out too, which I do think is an
Who's he
important.
replying to there, Monty? Who's he right to correct on that one? Who's he correcting on that one? Go on, just give me a name.
No. It's true.
Strawman doesn't exist. Like Chris Greeley
Yes.
is the best ever at flamethrowing strawmen that we're never going to attack him because they're literally strawmen. An awesome job, mate. What's his job again? Chief Cocksucker? What isn't he the fucking like head of esports or something? His title is fucking head of esports.
Chief cocksucker.
He's the head of esports.
How do you get that job? That's what I want to know.
So I just don't understand why the messaging was that, like, I think you can say we're having conversations about what to do with Academy and, give some level of transparency, because for me, the deflection was super weird and also doesn't actually give anyone any hope about what the Academy system could be changed into, which may in fact be positive in some way.
I think that like, as I understand Travis's reporting process before that video, if I want to use that word in quotes, there was concern that from Academy players who heard about this, that he was digging, that they were going to lose their jobs because he used the word vote. He was asked explicitly, please do not use the word vote. It's not accurate, right? He was given a lot of background information from some of the people I talked to, right? He was given a lot of background information about actually how this would work if they were to get rid of it. And he made a lot of players, because he used the wrong word, very scared for their livelihoods, which that is generally irresponsible. Is his point and his sentiment wrong? No, it was not. But and could Chris have done a better job of communicating it? Yes, I agree with that too. But like, using that word was not appropriate either. But I mean, that's part of journalism, is understanding how you phrase something in a way that's not sensationalist, that doesn't misconstrue your facts, and you communicates it in the proper way. That's part of the job, right?
Richard, let me ask you on this one. Don't you think it was a reprisal? The way it was done?
Oh, almost certainly. Yes. Okay, so right. Before I fully committed,
I'll very quickly say as well, just to look back into the Travis conversation before, Travis's response to Riot clowning him was exactly why he deserves everything he will ever get from that company. Because his response essentially was to go, look, I actually like this guy. What that would have to do with the like veracity of what someone's saying, I'll never understand, but it betrays everything about his psychology. And then he effectively was sort of like, and I thought, it's fine. It's fine what they're doing to me. It's like, you deserve everything, mate. Like, you can never ever fucking actually take a stand, even for yourself in that scenario.
So before I ruined my life and fully committed to esports, I used to be an office manager, and then I also ended up being a shop steward, like a trade union representative. I saw both sides of the equation. And basically there is a phenomenon that happens in an office environment, which is when a manager or a company, whatever it is, suspects that somebody just isn't going to get it, or they're bad news, or they're doing things and we just can't catch them, there is a term what you call manage them out. And what you do is you realize that on a long enough time scale, everyone fucks up at work, everyone makes a mistake. So what you do is you essentially surveil them round the clock. You listen in on their calls, you check their fucking emails, you use all your managerial privileges to catch them doing something wrong, and then you put them into the fucking wood chipper of the disciplinary process. And so what Riot get, and this is a big part of corporate culture, especially in America, where you are on these contracts that don't actually uphold any kind of workers' rights. We just need a reason to terminate you, and then we can. So what you'll find is Riot Games understand that corporate culture. Think about the people who founded the company and where they came from. One from the world of marketing, the other from the world of banking. The two most evil industries plaguing humankind coming together, and they just so happen to choose to make a video game with Chinese money, and they hired a fucking deranged sociopath to do their disciplinary behavioral process.
Jesus Christ.
How fantastic. What a great environment for children. I'm sure there's nothing untoward there. So one of the things they understand, perhaps more than any other company that exists in our space, is this idea of managing somebody out, keeping them on the outside and treating it like layers. So Travis, this is a shot across Travis's bows. No matter whether he's right or wrong, I'm inclined to lean more towards Jacob's interpretation than anyone else's, frankly. I think Travis fucked up. He gave them the rope and said, you won't do anything with that rope. You won't do anything bad to me, will you? But equally, you have to understand, Travis was firing a shot across their bows, in particular with this story and his video prior to it. This is a classic egotistical stare down, and you will not win one of those against Riot. So what they've done is they've hit back, and they are managing Travis out. Be under no illusion. This is a test. People are going to see how many clicks is he getting on those videos. Oh, not quite so much. How did it go over in the community? They hire people fastidiously to read every comment on Reddit. They're going to judge the reaction in the Reddit thread, and they're going to strategize appropriately, and that will most likely include another shot across Travis's bows very quickly. So we're going to find out the fettle of young Travis Gafford because he's in for a tough time now. He's stated his intentions. Riot Games don't bluff.
I will just say
they will manage you out.
I will just say on that part, like the one thing I think most of the press corps and the LCS does poorly, if we want to go back a little bit more broad than just him, is they're not very level with Riot. They don't stand up to Riot in any sort of way. I would say I kind of do actually a little bit. I would say I have a working professional relationship with Riot Games. Meaning, if I want to call to get a comment on a story, right? For example, the TSM FTX thing, right? Like the whole thing was basically that TSM casually omitted from their press release, which they gave me, casually omitted that Riot said they couldn't use the name. I was told in a call that it was all games. And Riot got pissed because Riot had said, no, you can't use this in Valorant and League, right? And so Riot's hair was on fire because it was out there that they could use it in Valorant and League, right? I called the certain people at Riot, I got the comment a couple hours later, right? Like, I have a professional working relationship with them generally, right? As someone who covers their game. But I also am kind of one of the first people that when they do something really shitty, put my foot down. We had some press issues around MSI with my team. I wasn't involved. I didn't really cover MSI day to day. But we had some issues where the Riot EU team was miscommunicating with teams, making us look bad, that we did something poorly, right? And making these teams like not want to work with us for the rest of the event at one point, right? And even though we did nothing wrong. And so I went and was just like, hey, it's kind of bullshit. Can you like fix this? Can we like work with StoryMob, like another PR agency that's like running this event for some people? Can we make sure this doesn't happen again? I really don't want to have my staff or myself have to go put out hairs on fire with teams that don't want to work with us during this event because we didn't do anything wrong. You just miscommunicated. That's on you, right? Like you have to kind of put your foot down. But the problem is, and this is such a problem with all of esports journalism, is that, you know, I play League of Legends probably 20 hours a week. Let's say 15 hours a week. I play the game a lot. I enjoy the game. I have basically for the past decade, right? Like it's something I play, or past 9 years or whatever. Something I play a lot. But
They've
at the
got
same
your chat logs, Jacob. Just to
that's
let you
fine.
know.
That's fine. The worst I've ever called anybody is a fucking idiot. So that's fine. Go ahead and put it out. I'll say it now.
Literally everybody in League.
Yeah, exactly. I know how to flame without being anything that's gonna
Lawrence,
get me
on the other hand,
canceled. It's like anyway. So like, you know, I play plenty of League. And when I first got into this industry, it's because I love the game. I wanted to be a part of the community, right? I was watching content from all three of you, actually, and like was interested in doing kind of what you guys did, right? And I've been really public about that. But at the same time, you have to be able to separate yourself from the game, your love for the game, And the fact that you are a press member who is covering the industry and that you can stand up and put your foot down and have some ethics and stand for something. I can be equally contentious with Riot Games over a press issue one day and play League of Legends in the same fucking evening. That's cool. I can do that. I can enjoy the game while also being frustrated with the people that make it. And it's okay, right? Like that's the thing. You have to be able to make that separation. The problem is that most people in the press corps cannot. And that is the issue. That's why they're allowed to slide on so many things. They should stand up to Riot. They should ask Riot the hard questions, because if everyone started doing it magically overnight, right? If every person who covered Riot said, we are not giving you mouthpiece access, we are not just reprinting everything you say when you're dealing with issues like sexual harassment and abuse, then wow, something would actually change.
And you're
They
right.
would realize, yeah.
And now you understand the true sin of Travis Gafford. He's the guy who'll break rank, right? And
Yes,
there'll always
exactly.
be one.
He's
I
the
mean,
scab.
Yes.
yeah, every scene has
Right.
has a Travis Gafford. I mean, you know, the people that will surrender the principle for the content, for the exclusive.
Cypher
But
and the Matrix.
Well, yeah, but listen, I also understand it. I mean, let's
The steak
be
is
real.
delicious.
Yeah, it is, and I know it's fake, but it's fucking delicious, right? No, but you know, I can understand it. Journalism is an industry is on its fucking knees. It deserves to be, if we're honest, but that's a separate topic. And
It's your favorite topic, though.
yeah, but you know, I'm a broken fucking record at this point. So, but it's on its knees, right? It doesn't make money. It you know, content is king. It's the only thing that keeps journalism upright, and that can be with an incredible expose. But those are so much harder than that one-off exclusive interview with a popular person. And so immediately you see the discrepancy. You can work 2 years on a really good story, hell, maybe longer. Or I can get an interview with a really popular player and I can keep the fucking lights on at the publication I work
Right.
for another month. And so the developers, the people that can wield access will always hold you over a barrel. And there will never be true unity in journalism because it's a fundamentally competitive industry.
But it needs to go both ways. It really does. Like that's what I was talking about. Like, you know, Dot's league section performs really well, right? Like if like I'm not saying we've done this, but I'm saying like if they really wanted to play hardball, right? You have no more access. Great, we won't cover it.
Yeah.
There's the hundreds of thousands of people that read
what
about
I
league,
found
right?
in my experience, and you know, because I went through that same moral quandary, and it was that the first ever blacklist I received was so fucking liberating. It was
It's a
the
badge of
best
honor.
thing because what I written, well, not even that. I just realized, wait, so okay, I don't get the interview with the player, but I can write an opinion piece or interview somebody, a competitor of your league, and I can actually print their unfettered opinions and unchecked for the first time ever because my company now no longer has a relationship with you,
Can't be
so we can
compromised,
hear,
right?
so we can hear the other side of
Yes.
the equation for the
You're
first
actually
time.
necessitated by them banning you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, when I think about all the orgs that have blacklisted me down the years, you know, Team Liquid did it for a bit, Evil Geniuses did it for a bit, ESL did it for a bit.
It's
They all,
ineffective.
they all came back around, and so yeah, people should put their foot down. These junior journalists, like you named some great names, some of them have even been nominated for esports journalist of the year despite their tender years, and that's fantastic. But it's really hard, you know. It's like it's hard when you're a junior and you get hired and you're told to step up and go get the traffic. The whole industry is broken in that sense, and I know Riot know that and they exploit that. And equally, from Riot's perspective, I don't blame them for exploiting it. It shouldn't be as easy.
It's just an obvious tactic to apply, isn't it? Remember, they don't care about journalism. They just want their game presented in the way that they want for marketing reasons and PR. And of course, yeah.
I mean, like it's it's part of what drove me to choose where I wanted to work this, you know, in the fall, winter after the ESPN layoffs, right? Like I left a month and a half early and took some time off, did a job search. I interviewed with 30 plus people. I had offers that are double what I currently make that I said no to because I thought it was a shitty job. was not a job that I wanted. It wasn't something I wanted to do. I wanted to work for a place that has access to a lot of those more junior journalists that you're talking about, people that I could work with and teach and like, build up that sort of like confidence and strength at a company that is good at finding those people, right? Like I came through that company as a junior journalist, right, 6 years ago, and I just think it's just sad though, because like so many of the editors that work at those websites don't know better themselves. So how are they supposed to tell their writers to do any different?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. There's a big.
If you knew some of the stories I heard, I won't say which sites, but people can guess. Editors literally taking the absolute best writers in esports, hacking away at some of the parts of their stories while telling them stuff like, look, gamers don't have very long attention spans, which, by the way, if you know the field I'm talking about, like a long narrative piece, a historical piece, that's exactly the person who does have an attention span. The guy who's already 80% of the way through a long historical piece, by definition, he's bought his train ticket. He wants to go to fucking Nerdville. He isn't trying to go, whoa, let's keep this all like, pop culture and stuff. Yeah, I agree. Part of it's also like systemic within the journalistic industry itself. Like you either have people who only know what Richard says, like the journalism approach, you just churn out as much shit as you can, you hope some of it hits, or as you said, Jacob, they just don't have the background, that they don't know themselves you can aspire to a higher ideal. They think this is just how business is done. Yeah, you just do it this way.
Well, and you put those people as the people who manage websites, right? Like that's the other part too. The one thing that's interesting about like Dot or Dixerto, which by Alexa rank are the most successful in the industry, right? Like the thing about them both is that they have someone at the very top whose background is not in esports, right? Like they're educated from something else, and they can provide guidance in a way that does matter from an ethical perspective.
Dixerto hate me whenever I say this, but it's like. I always maintain, and they will never make me recant this statement, even though they hate the term clickbait. I'm not supposed to use it, but I'm an editor at large. They can fire me anytime they want. I'll be fine. So they do clickbait to fund what I do.
Yeah,
it's the
Dot doesn't do clickbait, but we do a lot of SEO stuff. SEO drives a lot of the revenues that pays for my salary. I will be the first one to admit that. I'm not egotistical enough to say that my content drives. Like,
I think I'm supposed to call it SEO stuff as well. I don't know. Is it like you cover a fucking story that's just like, well, you'll never guess what Pokemon said on a stream the other day, and it's like I don't know what value that has to anybody, because if you watch the stream, you know, and if you didn't watch the stream, you probably don't fucking care.
I mean, because people search for it in Google, right? Like I look at those two websites, right? They're always within like a 1,000 or whatever.
There's a chance when
websites.
I type in Pokemon feet pics, it comes up.
But
so I guess it has value.
But the reason I say like those two websites are cut from the same cloth. It's just Dot covers more general gaming stuff about like League of Legends patch notes, etc., and Dixerto covers Twitch drama, right? Like it's fine. Yeah, they're successful both for the same reason. Just different.
I am glad they do. They cut me a fucking check every month.
It's fine, but it allows people like us to go do the big journalism features that are fun and are good to the industry, right? Like, but I mean that's why. But the problem is that those are the minority of the websites in this industry that succeed and have the 10, 15-year journalist at the top of them, right, as the editor, versus the smaller websites that are the ones in the LCS and the LEC press corps, and they are the ones that have to bow to Riot or feel like they have to, and they don't know any better.
But you'll never reach a point of purity, because again, I like Dixerto. I like the guys who run Dixerto. I consider them actually friends. But I'll also add, we did this thing. We did a podcast. Oh, they're really gonna hate me. Who cares? And we did this podcast. It was called. It was originally called Under the Influence. Basically, what it was going to be.
I remember this.
It was going to be me, and it was going to be someone else, Mike, who works at the company. And we were going to talk about influencer stories. We picked 3 big stories relating to influencers. We do 15 minutes because Zoomers have no fucking attention span. Well, me and Thorin and Monty are doing like 3-hour breakdowns on like one fucking topic, right? And then the average Zoomer is like, right, can you timestamp that, please? Because I need your 2-minute soundbite, or it cannot go in my fucking brain. So we did this podcast, and basically my take was I find influencer culture repulsive. I find selling your influence as an idea repulsive, and I find a lot of the things these people do would just be like outrageously stupid or rotten. So my take coming into all the stories was, well, you'll never guess what happened here. Look at this moron. Look at this asshole. And we got 3 episodes in, and then some higher up at Desert who said, we can't have him doing the influencer stories. he's always fucking negative. And I'm going, that's the point. That'll sell eventually on a long enough timescale. We had to change the name. It couldn't be called Under the Influence because it would fuck us up with alcohol sponsors, apparently.
Right. Probably limit the search. Yeah,
and what you realize is, it's if you want to do journalism non-independently, there is a penance you pay every step of the way, and it doesn't matter how high up you go. You can get to me. I can't even do a podcast laughing at fucking PewDiePie or fucking one of the Paul brothers. Because some sponsor isn't gonna like it. Yeah. It's all a fuck. So imagine what it's like for some fucking 17-year-old first big break, go to a Riot event, and you want to put your foot down and say, "Hey, Riot Games, you fucking suck." What this is what I mean. It's like I am sympathetic, but please stand up to them. Please be that 17-year-old with a backbone. But you're not, are you? You're the other 99%. You just want to be here and enjoy the show and make money. And I guess that's okay too.
But it's why, people will decry talking about this stuff. Us two in particular, talking about this stuff as if we're some drama mongering motherfuckers, right? That's why we're on the show. But it's not. The reason I wanted to do this when Monty reached out was because I wanted to talk about this type of stuff. The fact that it is important to stand up, right? You can do it. When I broke that rock story, I think I was 20, right? Because I
bet it was really tough, bro. I mean,
but the thing is that I stood up to the developer at 20 years old, right? I was a young dude, and you can do it. You can do it. If you're listening to this, you can do it.
Here's a rare example of where actually Jacob has followed suit what I said earlier. When I actually pointed out last year that TSM had basically just lied, called me fake news, literally repeatedly lied about that situation with Lena and Doublelift. Jacob actually himself corroborated, yeah, I've had issues dealing with TSM sometimes as well. They can be sort of vindictive basically. And so he didn't give all the details, but he gave his version of it. It doesn't have to do that. By the way, if you do that, that might cause problems with an org like TSM, because the joke of people like TSM and Riot is, as they explicitly tell you, I would never punish you anyway for that, they actually punish you while doing that, because that's how much little self-awareness these people actually have. But that's one of the things in general in the industry. I know people think, again, they want to make it like it's drama. This is literally our livelihood. And if people don't, on some level, agree there are lines that can't be crossed, they can come for any single person and they can take everyone to the limit. That's why you can't have people who are scabs. You have to have at least some understanding of, it doesn't matter what we agree on, personally on this issue is fucked up if they do it. And people have to come together on that, because also the other thing is, this is a rare example where you can use influence for good. The signal boost that all the main journalists and esports can get if they boost a story is enormous. Because even if it doesn't get to every fan, it gets to all the people in the industry who need to know that part of the story. And if there's one thing we've learned from these fucking episodes about Riot, is the one thing they inarguably do care about is optics. So if you can make them look really bad, they are actually, on some level, they must do something. Now, what they must do, there's a million ways they can wiggle out of it, isn't there? But they must at least do something. So, to me, that's just even literally giving exposure is a big deal. That's why when I said earlier, I get disappointed when people like Travis don't do it. Sometimes it's just a retweet, mate. We're not even talking about putting your balls on the table. Just do a retweet of the fucking story and help it get out there,
Well, back to the point, Rich. I was just going to say really quickly, back to the point that Rich made earlier about this community maturing and growing up. Actually, this community tends to stand with journalists now. They stand up for the journalists in a lot of regards. When a journalist is the one under fire by someone, by a team or whatever, they're like, "Yo, fuck you, team executive. I stand with this journalist. They do good work." Right?
If you'd have told me that when I was calling out Absolute Legends in 2012, I would have said you're insane.
It's true, but it's true. Yeah.
What I think is weird too, and what Travis pointed out in his video, is also the discrepancy in Riot PR, because on the game side, they're incredibly transparent. Their designers for game stream, some of their individual employees are posting patch notes or patch previews, and they answer questions. And so what's really weird about the esports scene is that it's so different in tone and in access level. And, how many times can you even describe what John Needham looks like? By the way, he's the one in charge of esports globally. Like,
True.
no one ever sees this guy. He's a ghost. He is a ghost. And there isn't a face to this. There isn't regular press appearances from anybody. There isn't any kind of interface that they do with the community. And I complained about the way they message things before, which is at the start of the spring or the summer split of last year, what they did was they issued like a statement about Black Lives Matter. But the way they did this was that they used their freelance broadcast talent to read a message on the stream instead of an actual Riot executive sitting there and delivering that message. And it's like, I don't know if the talent agreed with it, but I think that it's egregious to ask freelancers who are there to do a job with your company to deliver a corporate message when you, the executive, where it's coming from.
DJ out to announce their event had been cancelled, mate.
Yes. Yeah, I know, but that's the point.
Also, and all you saw from a Riot executive was him basically saying George Floyd deserved it. By the way, if you remember, there was a Facebook post that he got let go. You remember that?
Yeah.
There was a higher up at Riot that made a Facebook post about basically
just
how
another
George Floyd
reason
deserved it.
Yeah, just another fucking reason to love Riot Games executives, I guess.
And that's all you see. Because you're right. Because the freelancers have to say it. They have to stand up. They're like, they're the ones that are being put up to the social message. And then all you see from the executive is that he's making the stupid fucking Facebook post. And yes, he got let go. He resigned from the company. I'm forced out, right? But like at the same time, when you're contrasting, you're right. That is not good.
Yeah, but what my point is like on the one hand, on the game side, we have all this transparency from the company. He points out that Riot Mort, who is the one who is the principal designer behind TFT, streams all the time. I know from talking to Doa, who's deep in the TFT scene, that he's really an open book. And so what's confusing is that there's this level of obfuscation around the esports angle. And what I infer from this, correctly or not, because it's the only thing I can infer, is that things are going really well on the game side. And there is a reason they have to draw in the PR on the esports side. I can only assume, based on behavior, that reason is negative. It may not be. It may not be in the end. But that's what you infer. And it's really odd because most of the time, this sports executives, and Riot loves to compare themselves to traditional sports, are the ones in front of the camera, right? I am a commissioner of a league. We Four Horsemen me. Basically, you did that, and I showed up, and I talked about the issue.
And we were very gentle, and we sent you a hemorrhoid cushion afterwards.
Thank you very much. But my point is like I try and put myself out there, and I don't censor questions or I don't ask for pre-submitted questions, and I aim for a level of transparency when it comes to Flashpoint, and Thorin did too when he was a part of it. It's a core principle of what we wanted to do when forming the league, and so I just get so confused as to why the PR is so odd on the esports side, but so open, as Travis points out, on the game side. And I can only assume it's because they feel that they have to protect themselves for reasons.
So listen, I think this is an interesting angle to explore, but I also I'm kind of a little bit surprised that you're the one that wants to explore it, because you're usually the one that has a very good understanding of where we're at with American sports products. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, a product. And when you look at, okay, so let's do something analogous. NBA, Chinese expansion, the Hong Kong protests occur, right? The amount of money that is on the fucking line here, it is hundreds of millions. It is.
I mean, famously, they said they would literally just stop showing NBA games in China because of
Yes,
like Daryl Morey and LeBron's comments.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up with is we end up in this insane world. Okay. Now, by the way, I've actually met Adam Silver again, because we
commissioner of the NBA.
Yeah, because we filmed right next, and super cool dude, like, doing all the Travis Gafford qualifiers. But you end up in this mad world, don't you? Where he comes out and he says, we're never going to censor anyone from saying anything. Because at the NBA, we're not like the no fun league. We allow are owners and athletes to express their opinions. So you go, okay, that's cool. Like
Still
that.
find the fuck out of you if you complain about the refs, I noticed. But yeah, true.
then you have somebody say, well, of course Hong Kong should be fucking free, and what China's doing is fucking outrageous. And now all of a sudden it's a big brouhaha. You
and
look
he's
to
the
LeBron.
best.
You look
He's
to
the best.
Right?
Like Adam Silver's the best of the sports in this regard, and it's still not great. It's still not great.
And you look to LeBron,
He's
your big star, and now the press putting pressure on him, and he goes, I think we just shouldn't try and be politicians over here. We're athletes after all. Got an opinion about every fucking thing else. And what you'll realize is the information is being disseminated. You are being told what you can and can't say. The motherfucker from it was the Rockets, right?
Yes,
Daryl Morey.
Thanks.
Now with the 76ers, yeah.
He came out and sort of apologized, but didn't apologize. And
that must be where Sam Park learned it from. Right, there we go.
Yeah.
So we'll both with Clash Houston, whatever.
Well, that's his mentor. So actually,
there you go.
There you go.
He learned from the best.
So when I look at how Riot Games operate, and then I look at like how the NBA operate, I look at how Activision Blizzard operate, where they literally find a player and removed him from a fucking tournament circuit for 6 months on appeal. That was for saying Hong Kong deserves human rights and not to be oppressed by a fucking tyranny that, by the way, right now is still exterminating Uyghur Muslims, and everyone in America is still doing
just
business
shut
with
down
them.
the only independent press publication in all of Hong Kong. By the way,
Yes.
Apple Daily got shut down last week.
Hong Kong has fallen.
I was going to make some sort
because
of
the West
Gafford Industries China's been closed down. Fuck that.
Because the West got bored after a week. When it wasn't a hashtag or a T-shirt, we all fucking forgot about it. So when that's happening, and we're talking about the biggest corporations on planet Earth and the biggest sports leagues on planet Earth, you can't particularly single out Riot, can you? They're in line with the NBA.
They are. You know, it's interesting, like, even comparing, like, the Sabiolby thing, right? Like, that happened a few months ago in Overwatch.
Yes.
They
were boycotting his team, yeah.
I think the only reason it didn't get worse is because there was so much backlash around the Blitzchung thing a few years ago, right? Because, like, Activision Blizzard, like, you know how many people canceled their WoW subs because of that, right? Like, people were outraged at the Blitzchung thing, but like it took that much blowback to have some fucking human decency. Like, Jesus Christ, and stand up for like someone's
outrage. By the way, especially in esports and gaming circles, outrages you angrily tweeted for like twice.
To be fair, I actually do think
they were talking
a huge
about there being a protest at Activision Blizzard, and it was 60 fucking people.
Yeah. Well,
no one has any principles. We don't. We simply don't. There's like a handful of us. Yeah. And you will be despised and spat upon and live every day like it's the passion of the fucking Christ. And everyone else, just give me my video games. Give me the thing I want.
I wanted to hark back to something Christopher said earlier, though. I will commend Duncan and Christopher, the both of you, for your openness around Flashpoint and its issues, just generally, right? And like standing up for what has gone well and what has gone wrong. But from my experience as a third-party journalist, not involved with Flashpoint and not like talking to you guys every single day, I will say that the PR companies that were hired for Flashpoint, some of them are quite protective, and they were protective around Flashpoint. I don't think you are the reason that happened. I don't think you told them to be protective. I just think it's a natural instinct for games PR people.
I'll actually confirm that. Like, I'll give you a quick story. Yeah. Basically, I had similar things happen where the firm they brought in to do like media, but they were doing stuff, dude, like trying to book me onto like CS:GO podcasts. And I was telling the guy, like, you are aware, you can just send that guy to me. Like, I've been on a million podcasts. Like, I have my own, if I want to go on it, I'll go. And they were going, no, but we can tell him to like submit the topics. I was like, I don't care what the topics are. Like,
yeah,
I don't care.
That's right.
What I'm corroborating here, though, mate, is like, obviously I didn't tell them to do it, but you're right. By default, they just assumed this is the way it would be handled,
Sure.
That's
right.
Sort of like make sure no one could come in without.
Remember the story I just told you? Don't fucking buy the numbers, mate.
Yes.
With NIP, they reached out to me. They went, Richard, we understand you're an incredible journalist in the space. Like, not anymore. Not anymore, by the way. Oh, I do want to say just on camera, in case anyone thinks I am a demented egotist, me being on the list for fucking esports journalist of the year this year is an outrage. It's an outrage. I don't think I've even done anything, have I? I'm talking to a webcam now, like, usually half pissed. Whatever. It's an outrage. But anyway, they fucking... So basically, what you end up with is this nightmarish fucking... Hang on, I've lost my thread. Where was I going with it?
You were talking about NIP.
NIP?
NIP.
And
Yes,
their
right.
protection.
So I end up in this nightmarish
devices.
situation where DeSerto said to me that I have to be the guy who has to do the interview with Device, his first interview. And NIP said, we'd love you because we understand you're a journalist of some standing to do the interview. But the people who were running the agency for Device didn't really know who I was and didn't know the type of questions I would ask. And DeSerto went all in and said, yeah, we'll send you Richard Lewis and he'll give you all this great content. We'll do a wicked podcast. So I went there, sat waiting. Let's do it. Zoom up. Black screens, no one's coming. I get a message. Yeah, we're not coming actually. Device. Well, first they sent me an email saying, "Can you send the questions in advance?" And I went, "Now?
Yeah.
Now."
A player you've covered a lot of your career, commentated, hosted tournaments that he's won, majors, the whole thing.
So,
Yeah.
I sent them back and I said, "I've never done that, and I'm not going to do that now. But don't worry, it won't be crazy."
Oh.
Then they sent me another email back going, "Oh bloody hell, we so wanted to do this, but Device he's forgotten about it, and he's in training right now." So they threw the player under the bus, and I know he didn't forget and was going to do it. And basically, I sent them an email back going, "This is pretty unprofessional, isn't it?" And they went, "Well, we've never been spoken to like this. We've never been insulted like this. We'll never work with you again," as if I was the outrageous one. And so that right there is the fucking Riot method in a nutshell. That's what they do. That's what all these companies do. They make it seem like you're the one that's
Of course.
the piece of shit.
But the moment they want something, they'll call you. The moment they want press on something, I hate it. I hate it. I'm very outspoken about PR people generally on Twitter. I got an email today saying that I was back in the Sizon database, the giant press relations PR thing. Literally, I'm going to respond after the show and be like, "Please fucking remove me." Because it's awful. Like, and you come to them with the angle. You want to talk about push pull, right? Like, you cover the embargoed seed fundraising round thing they want you to cover, and then you have the one thing that you need the actual question, the hard hitting question on, and you get fucking ignored and gaslit. And it's annoying because it's not a push pull. It's they want everything and you get nothing. And it's so frustrating. And Games PR, that's it in a nutshell. That's it in a nutshell. It is incredibly frustrating, even with people that aren't like that. Like,
and they're like, do you want to? Oh, we've heard this, and you go, okay, what's the story? And it's like, you're never going to believe it. And they set it up, and it's either it goes one of two ways. It's either something amazing about their company that's not amazing and has already been disseminated in a press release to everyone else, and you're getting it like 4 hours before the fucking intern at some other dog shit website can put it out, or it's about a competitor, and they're just gonna tell you some outrageous, outlandish story about a business rival, and you've got one source on it, and they go, "Please rush it out."
And by the way, another thing to say about Riot, if we're talking about interfacing with the press, they have categorically, provably established a track record of being entirely untrustworthy with how they deal with press on stories. They are notorious for all the tricks of the trade. Oh, we'll give you a response tomorrow, and then basically go to their people, leak it now, get it out tonight. They'll just do that shit all day long.
Activision Blizzard's done that with me too. It's not they're not alone. I
think Activision Blizzard are worse than Riot, actually.
I agree. My girlfriend's probably in a work call right now, but I could have her. She was in the car with me when this happened. I had a senior level executive on the communication side of Activision Blizzard all those years ago, right before the year before Overwatch League. And I called, and I had the story, the first few franchises in the Overwatch League, who they were owned by, Kraft, Wilpon, etc. Right, the whole lot. I think there were 4 or 5 of them, and I got a call back, and it was like, "Can you wait until like 4:12 p.m. or whatever?" And I was like, "A very oddly specific time. Why is this a very oddly specific time?" We didn't wait till 4:12 p.m. We got the story out on our own terms. And then I get a message from another journalist saying, yeah, by the way, like, this just showed up like 15 minutes before you posted it in my inbox. And I was like, you motherfuckers. It wasn't the fact that it was leaking. It was the fact it was leaking to me. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like,
it's so ridiculous too, because by the way, if people don't know how this is supposed to work, is that here is how normal companies operate. Journalist comes and says, "Look, guys, I've got this information." And the company goes, "You got us. So let's work together on how this is going to go out," right? So at least the company has some sort of ability to submit a comment or, shape the narrative in some form, or say like, "Okay, we'll do the announcement after you," or whatever. Because if you don't do that, then the journalists are going to scoop you and not include you in this for the rest of time. Like, you burn that bridge and it's just fucking over. So most smart companies will not engage in those tactics, because here's the thing about reporters. You don't know what they're going to find. So you kind of want to be on their good side in case they find something you really don't want out there. So at least you can have some level of say and partnership in how that goes out.
Yeah,
that's right.
And in esports, the norm has to be, by the way, I very quickly set myself a rule of not doing it every time. The rule was, if you burn me once, all right, business. Twice, no, I'm never asking you for comment again.
Well, and it used to be even worse, particularly on the esports team side of things, because they used to literally, like, on the roster announcement, for example, right, back when Richard and I were scooping these, 2014, 2015, right, like, they used to literally sell their roster announcements as a piece of content. Yeah, if you guys remember, for example, Blitz Esports, the website, made some really great content. Before that, they were an app, instant esports app, and I think C9 and maybe Liquid. There were like 1 or 2 or 3 LCS teams that partnered with that app, and it was, they get the roster moves before anyone else. They get the official thing in their app, and they're a new site, Riot funded, by the way, or partly Riot funded, and this was supposed to be the thing, and literally it was like, you hurt our livelihoods as a business, you took away from our bottom line by breaking the scoop, which is not true, because Richard and I would report it, and 3 days later they come out with their official announcement, and as many people would read the official announcement as they would read the original report. It didn't impact them anything.
Actually, if anything, by being the harbinger of the move, we would generate more fucking hype for the move.
Yeah, that's true.
Also,
you've even hit on it,
a last minute opportunity. If the move's terrible and your fans don't like it, you can have a Brexit.
Also, by the way, since you've actually brought it up, that's another thing to mention about Riot's history with the press. They literally were part of the initial funding for Blitz, which at the time was presenting itself as like, we're going to do high quality interviews, and we're going to, like, for example, they were literally interviewing Monty about a fucking direct competitor of Riot and Riot themselves, while not having a disclaimer saying, by the way, Riot actually fund this fucking whole thing. Now, in that scenario, that means they directly wanted some level of control or potential influence over people in their space. And here's the punchline. When I outed that this was the case, the cocksuckers behind Blitz had the gall to actually, no joke, do a tweet like, "We would like to thank Thorin for mentioning that this in fact is the we were entirely wrong. Like, give me a break. Like
thanks for exposing us."
I know. Yeah, we have reminded us that we were partially funded by that. Like, it's all you did. Did you? Did you have a bit of amnesia on that one? But what it suggests, by the way, is another thing about Riot's approach, which is there's always this sinister control element underneath that's never explicitly said. By the way, remember back when Richard first got banned on Reddit? Everyone said it was a conspiracy theory. Oh, he stretched that whole story with the Timor hat so far. What, Riot's really involved with Reddit, but they have anti-Riot stories. By the way, you know nothing about the concept of fucking media if you believe that there's no scenario where you would do what's called a limited hangout and release part of a story yourself that you cannot suppress in order to make people think that is the only part of the story, and in doing so show that some of it gets out, but explicitly they do not see other parts of it. God, I can't imagine what could be
Riz,
through
crazy
my
how
head
they
for the
chose
last
all the
year.
same mods
Yeah.
to be the mods of every
This is
subreddit
what I was
for
gonna
all of
get
their
to.
games.
The smoking gun is this. They could maybe have claimed, look, League of Legends came out so long ago and Reddit wasn't the bigger thing back then and it grew over time. The problem is this, the smoking gun is they gave the same mods, the TFT sub and the Valorant sub. So that shows that at a minimum, they tacitly agree with the approach that these mods have. Because they used to try and claim themselves publicly, you know, we don't control the Reddit moderators, they can do what they want. Like, no, you went out of your way to essentially like gift them to be your fucking godfather to your next child in that scenario.
Also, look, this is my tinfoil hat theory, but given the amount of corporate fuckery, it would not actually shock me if some of the mods were actual Riot employees. Like,
Well, they did have a mod who was an employee who then left.
But does it even matter if they're employees? If you're, if you,
I don't even
if,
care
you know,
about that anymore.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
I don't
it's
either,
true.
frankly.
But it doesn't. To Duncan's point, it doesn't matter if you if you know you have TFT coming out in 2 years and you register our TFT on Reddit, right? Make it a private subreddit, and then a month or 2 weeks before TFT comes out, you go to the same mods and you go, here's the keys, run the ship, right? To Duncan's point, right? Does it even matter if they're employees? Doesn't.
The outcome's going to be the same almost, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're employees.
Yes.
It just matters you're giving them the same level of power, and you're kind of like inadvertently approving of the way that they've handled the past
At the end of the day, those moderators on that subreddit are so over-invested in a fucking video game. It doesn't even matter whether they're on the fucking payroll or not. They'll do whatever a Riot fucking employee bids them to do. Worst example was that guy fucking Triggs, who was like the security dude, and I think he was a mod over there for a bit, and then he left, and now God knows what he's doing. This guy, I guarantee, by the way, please watch this video. This for you, Triggs, because I know you always obsessively watch this stuff. Please sue me if this is wrong. I know you violated my data protection. I know you did. Just come at me if that's wrong, right? And let's all do discovery. You're a fucking piece of shit what you did. He went out and basically was going publicly, going, Richard Lewis is threatening to dox people. He's done this, he's done that. He was literally, as a Reddit mod and a Riot employee, tweeting, posting stuff like that on Reddit. It's unreal. I've kept it all. It's all archived. It's all backed up. It's a fucking slam dunk. That guy was basically, I think, one of the main reasons why I thought it mattered so much, because I couldn't quite understand why a Riot operator, someone who was that juiced in with the security aspect of it, works in security in general in his career, was a moderator of the subreddit. It's that really felt bad to me.
Because and here's the other problem that with just journalism in the industry, and I think this applies to this concept too. It's the same thing as Reddit. It's an audition for another job. You know how many people I see come and they do journalism,
like that, what was he called? The Enigma Blade, that guy. Remember that fucking tragic weeb motherfucker? Yeah.
I didn't even know this because I just don't like. I pay attention to Overwatch at the business level, but I'm not like super into Overwatch, right? Like anymore as a beat reporter. I work with Liz Richardson, one of the best at that, covering that game kind of day to day, right? I don't need to do that. I don't need to be in the weeds on that game. I saw the other day Deer, who did translation for Travis not a few years ago, right? And she is now working at the Dallas Fuel. And she was supposed to be like but that's the thing. Like there was another journal. I'm not throwing shade at these people. I'm just pointing out there's another guy that I met early in his journalism career. He's now social media manager for the Florida Mayhem. It's because journalism and Reddit by that proxy, the Reddit moderation, it is a audition for another job. And that's I understand journalism is not a very good livelihood for a lot of people, but that's also part of the reason that you see some of the bending, because people want to be able to get other gigs.
Journalist, was it IGN that gave like the fucking game an outrageous review?
It was Leah B. Jackson, who later worked for Riot Games, and when she did like a re-review of League of Legends, I think it was like a couple of years, maybe like it was, I'm going to say like 2013 or something, maybe. When she re-reviewed it for IGN, which at the time was considered a respected gaming site, good joke, eh? It was through the Looking Glass back then. She gave it 9.2 out of 10 score of all video games ever played in it. So essentially, she sort of saw League of Legends as sort of, like a Casablanca or Citizen Kane of the video game genre.
Which I don't even know if that's true now. It could never have been true back
Oh
then.
yeah, come on.
It
No.
could never have been true back then. And she's employed by the company, so great.
I mean, it's just
Nothing to see here.
same level of corruption just exists generally. You know, like
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Do you want to know what's changed about me? Yeah, that's what's changed about me, Jacob. In 2014, 2015, 2016, I was like fighting because I wanted esports to be different. But it isn't different. It's
not
the same. It's the mainstream.
I hear shit like that, and I think about like there's this all this coverage right now around Purdue Pharma and OxyContin and the opioid crisis in the U.S. and how terrible it was. And it's like the guy that at the FDA that approved OxyContin for market ended up working for Purdue Pharma less than a year later, making high 6 figures. And it's just like, oh, okay, so he was a government employee that and then goes and works for the same company that he approved a incredibly harmful drug. It's the same shit. It's the same.
It was why I wanted us all to plant our flags early. So when these companies came, and I knew in 2004 they were going to come, right? I wanted us to put that and say, you can't get in. We run this, and it will be different, but it won't be different. We let them in. I even think I think I might have let some of them in. I got lost in it, you know? Esports has utterly failed, and everything we will talk about on the Four Horsemen is just a manifestation of that failure. Travis Gafford, Riot Games, it's all bullshit, man.
The good news is
the fact that we have
the Four Horsemen coming up.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. I mean,
there you go.
Here's the thing about this show is it's like we all wish this show wasn't necessary, especially at the frequency that it is. In fact, we can't even schedule this show fast enough. That's why we're talking about this weeks later. While we have other things that we do, and we haven't even talked about like the Adderall issue that was brought up in COD, which is incredibly important to talk about. I mean, there's always stuff that's going on, and sometimes we just can't even get to it fast enough. Right. And it's depressing. Like you don't see this level of scandal in or incestuousness.
Can I ask everyone here then?
Or
Christopher, start me, you, Christopher.
Yep.
It's failed, mate. It's seriously, you can't be happy with where esports is right now. I'm not.
No,
it makes me
sad.
Yeah, it does. It legitimately does, bro.
I'm not so. I think there are a lot of issues, but I'm still really motivated to do my best in covering them, right? Like showing them to the public, right? Like I really like what I do, and for that reason, like I am like, I don't necessarily do opinions of it. I do investigative work, and like that. There's always something to cover, right? There's always something to deal with. And I just feel like naturally quite called to do this, like Richard mentioned him earlier in the show, but like I've had a lot of people ask me like, are you going to be William Turton? You're just going to piece the fuck out of the industry and go cover something else, like tech culture or politics or whatever else? No, I'm not, because I actually feel quite called to cover this industry and all of its bullshit, right? Like all the terrible shit that happens all the time. Somebody's got to do it. But like, yeah, I mean, it's disappointing because like there are moments of flash brilliance where you're like, damn, this industry is like actually like going the same play or going somewhere, things are improving, and it's like one step forward, two steps backwards. And this whole like press thing, the whole reason we're talking about doing the show in the first place is just like, god damn it, like why are we taking the two steps backward? Things were getting better at one point in time, like, and now they're just continuing to get worse.
Well, I think it's also that. I mean, the level there isn't any accountability for these monolithic corporations that are making the decisions about how to approach the press, and the press is compliant, as we've been talking about with these decisions. Right. And it's also, I think one of the most disappointing things is that I'm not going to argue that, especially me and Richard and Thorin, sometimes we phrase things intentionally as part of a character, as part of our online persona, or as part of our genuine personality, that riles people up. And so, but the viewpoint that people have is that the way it is said is worse than the actual claim of what is being made, which is what has been brought up earlier. And what's so depressing about that is that it leads to a non-accountability of these companies that are behaving incredibly badly. And then also you have these people who work for these companies who go into what is effectively a psychological self-defense, self-preservation mode where they cannot see or refuse to believe what these companies, the company they work for, is doing.
Basically, think about this. It's like when everyone knows, this is a classic thing that happens on Twitter all the time with every possible demographic. Say an example would be a woman was frustrated and she just tweeted like, "Oh, men are all trash." Obviously, her entire replies would be like a million men going, "But I'm not, like, what the fuck? Like, what? They're not all men." Like, right, basically, it's the same scenario, Monty. What happens is there might be like 4 cool people at Riot, as an exaggeration, and they maybe hang around with the ones that are less corrupt. So when you say like, "Oh, Riot are corrupt," they go, "But I'm not, and we're not like that," and then they can never grasp the totality of it. I've noticed. Like, basically, as long as they're on some like biblical fucking like Old Testament God, as long as you can me 9 righteous men in Riot, then it can survive or some shit. It has to be the other way around, guys. It has to be only 9 cunts. Then we can also keep the company going.
It's like a zero sum. Everybody's plays a zero sum game, and I don't to both of the points you just made, you about companies and Christopher, you about people, right? Like, I don't agree with everything all 3 of you guys do, but like when you say something that I think is correct, good for the industry, it's an interesting topic to discuss, needs to be talked about, I can go like, yeah, that person said something, it's worthwhile, right? Like, signal boost it, whatever, share it, talk about it privately, yada yada yada, right? Like, you don't have to be like, just because they said the one thing I disagree with, everything they say is dog shit. Vice versa. You can have people that you really admire that, like, oh, they say all the great things. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them all the time if they do say or do some stupid shit. And the same can be said for companies, right? Like, some companies can do some good sometimes, they can do some bad, and you just have to hold them accountable and be in the center. It's not zero sum. And like that's part of the problem.
Yeah, and I look at the way that some of the employees of these companies react towards this bad news as if it's some sort of personal attack. But at the end of the day, you're working for companies that, do suppress information, that do engage in anti-journalistic practices like we're seeing, that do go on the attack behind the scenes very unfairly, and also over stupid bullshit, by the way. Like, we're going back to Rock's Tigers thing, we're talking about a leak of a roster breaking up. It's not like a crime. It's not a felony that you need to cover up for the safety from the police of your executives, right? And so the level of vengeance that exists at Riot is just extraordinary.
Well,
it's extraordinary.
We haven't even talked about Neom and that whole fucking debacle. So after the whole Neom thing blew up, I did a bunch of reporting on this, right? So they did the deal with the LEC. Yeah. They didn't tell their team owners, right, until literally the day it was announced, like an hour before it was announced, and the team owners had no say. And like, oh, maybe it's not great that you partner with an authoritarian government that likes to kill gay people. Yeah, thing to do, right? Like, the fuck, right? Like, do some heat check here. And I reported on that, and then there was this like big Riot Unplugged. They're like their regular meetings where they they send the big executive. In this case, it was Nicola Laurent. You send the big executive in front of the whole entire staff, and you let them do their thing. And because it was in the middle of work from home last summer, I had a Riot employee hot mic for me. I've reported on this. Literally got on the work call, called me, put the work call on speaker, and let me listen and record the entire time. I recorded the entire fucking thing, and I reported on it. And I immediately heard feedback. How dare you, Jacob, leak our internal comms? How fucking dare you? Like, we are not like super angry. And it's like, wait, you're not angry at yourself for doing this like really indignant, shitty like thing that's immoral and that people are really angry with you. You're mad at me for reporting what the steps you're taking internally so it doesn't happen again. That was my story, was like they were setting up this council to like better vet their sponsorships, etc. Right? Have more people in the rule. It's just bullshit. It's just bullshit. Like, I wasn't the one that I didn't do anything
positive
wrong.
Press for them after what happened.
That's right. They're making changes. They're making changes to not have it happen again. And they were mad. And I didn't do anything wrong, right? Like, and it's just like they were super internally. They like sent out these really nasty emails that they were gonna find the person that leaked to me or whatever. And it's just like, the fuck are you doing? It's a positive story. Like, do you like how it got out? No, but is it a positive story? Yeah, it is. Like,
also, all roster moves are positive stories, by the way.
Yes,
all of them are. Yes. you want, and this is why you also want publicly available salary information, is because it keeps things moving in the off season and eyes on your game. So you, as a league, you actually want these stories. You want them. They're good for you. They might be bad for the teams, but they're good objectively for the product.
Yeah, I will say on the roster move front, they've gotten a lot better. Riot, in both free agency shows that I've done the past 2 years, have been fairly supportive with like assets, right? Sending over player headshots, which are their copyrighted material, sending over some of their some of the asset packs and stuff that they've done for use in those shows, right? Like they've gotten a little bit more on board with the whole roster change thing, but we're still at a point where some of these other stories, region locking, voting away or whatever, talking about Academy, whatever the hell the Travis thing was, Neom, etc. Like there's still like big outrage around this, and it's ridiculous. We need to evolve past, like, roster change stories are all a-okay now. Now we need to evolve past to the other stuff and be okay with the other stuff. It's part of, like, this is the one thing about traditional sports. It's a part of the zeitgeist. Traditional sports people, I know people that work in the NBA. I know people that work in the NFL. When a big story comes out about them, they're like, fuck, I wish that wasn't out. But they aren't like, let's go burn the journalist that did it. That's the step they don't do.
So,
and that's the part about games company.
There's one thing you've just brought up there that we should actually mention, because this was like a quite recent story, actually, which is when you said there about how they're great with assets, headshots and stuff.
Oh, I was just going to bring this up.
They had a Flickr account, which, by the way, was brilliant. It was one of the best esports. I always used to give them credit for it in Riot. They, for years, since literally, I think the end of season 3, so the first season of LCS, they had a Flickr account that you could go to and you could find albums of every LCS and EU LCS season. They were all high quality images. By the way, amazing stuff, because if you're working just on a website and you don't have like people on the ground, you don't want to have to use someone else's image, or you don't want to have like a dispute over who owns it. So when the game dev gives you those, perfect. That was one thing I thought they did a great job with. Used many of them for my own articles, like, historical pieces. Recently, there was a story, I think it came out through Ashley Kang, where basically they're now like, they've sort of like sold the rights to those photos to some other company.
S1E6 Media.
Basically, it's like one of the ones that they go through with sports or whatever, and then they're now charging, but they're charging as if you are like a hooked in like media company in like the NFL or something. Right. So like I saw one
certainly did tweet about the story that impacted on her personally. Yeah,
I saw there was basically a screenshot where I'd have to go off the top of my head with the figures, but I believe like 10 photos, they do you a discount and it only cost you $450. Like we're not talking about like a price range that's way outside the bounds of any kind of amateur person in League of Legends.
Well, that's another we are sports, we can do things the sports way, because actually, just to correct you there a little bit, SPAT Media, the company they sold those rights to, they're only esports. It's literally all they do.
Okay. Right.
They are an esports specific company, and they actually kind of made their feet at the very beginning of it, because I've dealt with them for years. I talked to these guys. I actually think they're pretty well-intentioned people, but I think it was a bad read by Riot and by them on terms of the esports community, where media is, what types of money it makes. They started because they would pay photographers actually fairly good rates to go to undercovered events, like events that don't get photographers, like Riot events, take those photos, and then they'd give them to media for free. They did that for basically the first 2.5 years, 3 years of their company. They were incredibly useful because we would want to cover an event that nobody could go to remotely or whatever, right? Like write about results or whatever, do a recap or whatever at ESPN, and they would provide us the photos because they had a photographer on ground and they paid them fair rates. It was great for the photographers. No one's arguing that you should take away a photographer's livelihood. What the problem is that both Riot and SPAT made the conclusion that they can be like traditional sports and that companies have hand over foot the ability to pay for this. And that's just not true. Even, we were talking earlier, even the successful companies from a revenue perspective, Texerto and Dot, I don't think they would pay for that. I think we would rather just send a photographer to the LCS every other week or every 3 weeks or whatever, take our own photos, and that would be cheaper in the long run. Just have a library of photos.
Publication, I just have someone draw a fucking cartoon.
It would actually be much cheaper.
Yeah. No joke.
And funnier. But also, like, it doesn't make
terrible.
It doesn't make any sense either, because we have to look at the conditions of some of these esports tournaments right now. And while LEC viewership is on the rise, LCS viewership is not doing as well as it used to. That's just objectively true. And so it shows the audience is smaller. So charging, what you need right now is more articles, more marketing that's free. It's free to have people write, like journalism websites, write this on and write up everything and put the photos in and make the content more dynamic. And so to charge for it right now just disincentivizes the entire media sphere surrounding LCS and other League of Legends products. And it's pointless. Like what's baffling to me is like, this is the core problem with developer run esports is they need to decide whether this is a marketing exercise for the game or whether it is a business that needs to make money in and of itself as an entertainment product. And as long as that conflict exists and as long as the developers are involved, you can't resolve it because in theory, if it's a marketing exercise, they should be giving this away for free like it was. What you're seeing is Riot is changing their policy from marketing exercise to independent business because they franchised and now they have partners that expect revenue. And the partner teams do not get revenue from the game, so they have to figure out other things to do.
Whole issue within itself, by the way. Like they should be better monetizing the game. If you talk to any team owner who has their hands in like all the different franchises, the ones they like the best are the ones that don't cost you $25 to $40 million a franchise, aka Overwatch, but the ones that are low franchise fee, high game incentive. You know, all the skins.
Rainbow Six is a really good example.
Yeah, exactly, right. And being able to make money off of that while not charging you an arm and a leg to get in the first place, like get in your door in the first place. And I think that is. You're right. They are trying to make it this independent business. I think it should be. I think that's long-term better because it means that it doesn't have to hinge on the game forever. Correct. The game doesn't have to be successful for the league to be successful and vice versa, right? But at the same time, they needed, and I said this to people at Riot and to people at SBAT, when that photo deal came out, I was like, this is a bad read of where you're at in the industry because there are very few publications that can even afford to pay their writers. And you can say, oh, well, just don't have a publication. Great. So how are people supposed to cut their teeth, right? At least they're paid something, even if it's trash, right? Like it's not free work, but like if somebody's paying, I don't know, 25 cents for 100 words or 25 cents a word, whatever the really crappy rate or whatever, like some of the garbage rates I've heard in some of these smaller websites that cover League on a regular basis, like at least they're being paid something. These novice, like kind of enthusiast writers that eventually may go on to become very good journalists. It's a bad read to go like, if they can barely pay their writing staff, then how are they going to pay $125 for one photo? They're not. They're not.
These packages too are ridiculous. It's like $10,000 packages for like savings. It's like which journalism website beyond just a couple can even afford that or even wants to pay it? Like you said, it is actually cheaper at a certain point to send your own photographer a couple times a season or literally just have illustrations made. It's cheaper to literally have somebody just draw the players.
Sure. Yeah. It was a terrible read. It's one of those like we want revenue for something. There's a way to make revenue here, so we took it. And it's like, yeah, but like at the same time, you need to like look at your media landscape. Just scroll through the LCS or LEC press discords. Look at who's in there. Look at what their sites are from. Go do some background research. Like a lot of the sites, once you get out of the like upper echelon of funded sites, right? There's profitable companies, Xerto, Dot. There are VC companies, Upcomer, Esports, GGE, right? All these other ones that are like basically just running on pure investment to run operations right now. And then there are the bootstrapped, don't have a lot of money, but have enough to kind of make it by. I'm thinking like ESTNN, Stropes, etc. Like these, and those people are important, and you're not doing a good read if you look at them, right? Like they're just, if you make deals like that, you're not thinking about them. So I don't know, the whole thing, and just it just seems like there's a very big the whole thing from this whole show. It seems like there's a very bad disconnect from, and part of this I think is due to COVID. Part of it I just think is also to some of the people that are being brought in, some of the people that are employed at Riot right now that have traditional sports backgrounds expect different, and expect more professionalism from a much less mature industry. There's a huge disconnect between media and Riot in general, and I don't think, I probably have more discussions with Riot on a regular basis or people that represent Riot, StoryMob, etc. about the way they treat press. But that's usually because I initiate those conversations, not because they're actively seeking the feedback. I think they do one into-split survey every year, or like twice a year. Every split, they'll do an into-split survey about what could be better. But how much of that are they implementing, and how many people are actually going to be honest too, right? Like that's the other thing. Back to the whole like they got to appease Riot. How many people are actually going to be honest? There's not a safe way to communicate the feedback to actually stand up, even if it's not the most controversial thing. How could we make it scheduling of interviews better? The really minor things that make things better for the journalist, right? Like, and they're not actively seeking that feedback. They should be.
It's rough times, and it's even worse because they've got the biggest game, right? And so it really, this is back to Richard's point. It really doesn't give me a lot of hope because if this is what's happening, if the top esport is having to go to these lengths in order to try and monetize, which are clearly not great, and I don't think feasible. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are making a bunch of money from it, but that seems to be unlikely from what I know of the space. This is why we're so kind of glum about the state of esports in general. Is like it feels really desperate right now across a lot of fronts, especially on the money fronts. And I don't know what's going to turn that around, but I think that's a lot of the reason why we see such bizarre practices, not only by Riot but by other companies as well. When it comes to the press, is that there's a lot of stuff people just don't want to talk about because facing the reality of what's going on is grim. It's quite grim.
I think the worst part is when you think about all the other businesses and all the other industries that corporations can exert influence over, esports is the one they will win in, and they will have complete dominion over.
Because of the IP?
No, over everything they want. Not just the IP.
No, I'm saying, you think it's as a result of them owning the IP, the intellectual property behind the games, or do you think there are other reasons?
No, I
would just say the weakness of the character of the people in the industry. I mean, I'll give you an obvious example. Here's one from our world, Monty, League of Legends. Last year, everyone at the same time as professionally and personally on their Twitter timeline, they are melting down about other situations in the world. Everyone sat back and said, you know what? Oh, China, I have no opinions on China. Let me watch the World Championship be held as a LAN in China, and I'm just going to sit back. In fact, you know what? I'm not just going to sit back. I'm going to praise them. I'm going to talk about how their method of controlling all of this was better than everyone else's and how they actually were basically, in some ways, wouldn't it be great if we could all be sort of totalitarian regimes, and wouldn't that make the world easier? Everyone was just fucking loving this shit. I've saw so few critical voices on this topic. It made me realize the whole industry is rotten to the fucking core.
Didn't I tell you as well, though?
Basically, that meant even people in esports who don't directly have a Chinese fucking finger on their neck still were like, doesn't help to rock the boat, does it? And they just fucking said
they don't care. They don't care, right? Like anytime anything monumental, New York Times, last week tonight comes out about like Uyghurs or Hong Kong, like I'm the first person to fucking retweet that shit, right? Like, cause like I have some principles. I care about the world around me other than like, and I'm not just hyping myself up, but it's sad to not see more people doing that, right? Like, just like pay attention, like you can be happy the world, again, separating yourself from the game. You can be happy the World Championship is happening, that, there's an LAN event, that it's really cool that it's going on, but simultaneously not be a sycophant and be like, well, shit, it's actually really terrible how how China has handled coronavirus and, locking things down and the way that they treat their people. Yeah, it's fucking appalling. You can have both things at once. You can have both opinions at once, and that's okay. You don't have to it's not zero sum. You don't have to go either way. Like, so, Jesus.
Like I got a random, fucking message out the blue from one of my old fucking contacts from back in the day, and they basically said that like, oh yeah, just so you know, whenever Worlds or MSI or anything like that's held in China, if you're a non-Chinese team, every computer you fucking play on is recording all the data and it is given over to the Chinese teams. It's like, all your demos are recorded, all of that stuff. I mean, I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if I can get that story over the line. But
Jesus.
Yeah. but
I don't know if
that's
it's given to the teams. I can say with probably full assurance, anything you do in that country is given to the government. There's literally a law about that, right? There was a whole debacle about Apple and iCloud and how data was
Right,
stored. That it
Well,
had to be stored. It had to be if you were a Chinese
This
citizen that used
one-
iCloud, it had to be stored on a government
they were
server.
specific about it pertaining to like your practice session
Interesting.
out there. Maybe that's something people can look into. I don't know. Not my
Just
problem,
dropping the
mate.
breadcrumbs for other.
It is not my
investigative
problem.
journalists.
Everybody has signed up to this bullshit double standards, and if you
Yep.
like it, fucking live it. I'm
That's
not.
fair.
Agree. The problem is this, Richard, is everyone was fine having their little fucking placard that they wrote what they believed in when it was a safe just opinion on a tweet, and that's all you were doing is,
Yeah.
there's my tweet. They wanted to do that, right? But they stupidly didn't realise that's a high stakes game. So then what happens is you can't be a tourist anymore. Now it's in your life. Now there's a massive country that's exerting enormous influence. Well, it's not time to be quiet anymore. You were a guy who was bragging about, what you believe. So in that scenario, I have two perspectives on it. If you never said anything to begin with, just continue saying nothing. You're fine. You're consistent. But if you were someone who was going to be out there on every big issue, like LeBron James, you now are a bitch if you don't say anything.
Oh,
you
you
are
have to talk
necessitated to say something.
Yeah.
The idea that you can sit back and go, I don't have an opinion on that. Well, then you don't get to have an opinion on the other thing. That is the way it works with having actual principles, mate.
I
Yeah.
don't think I saw more than like maybe 2 or 3 esports outlets of all the ones. There was a story, it kind of went under the radar. I got linked it maybe the day after. Reuters reported earlier this year that the US government is in negotiations to figure out some sort of like basically like an absolvement and like a promise not to use the data, legally binding promise not to use the data, or on the flip side, a divestiture if they don't want to make said promise of Tencent around Epic and Riot. There was this huge thing about like there was a story and it was a Reuters original report that like either you make some real data privacy commitments or you get rid of these companies and your stake in these two companies. And we re-reported that, but I didn't see too many esports sites talking about that. And it's just like, what the fuck? Like, that's a big story. You can't just ignore it, man.
No one
Like,
cares about any of that stuff, Jacob, mate. They care about the fucking shooty, bang, bang, firework. Does my video game have drama? Is Keemstar coming to my video game?
Did Richard Lewis block me?
Yeah, did Richard Lewis or Thorin block me on Twitter? Like, seriously, this industry deserves to die. It deserves to die, and everyone in it deserves to suffer. So, I don't know what else to say. We've made our bed. I really hope we get to lie in it.
Well, what a note, I think, to end the show on, unless anybody else has pressing topics to come up on. A grim note.
No, do we do questions now? I was geared up for the questions.
Sure, we can gear up for the questions.
Because here's what you won't know, Jacob. We've invented our own cryptocurrency called Grog Coin. Do you know about that?
No.
Right. There you go. We've invented our own cryptocurrency called Grog Coin. And what if you buy Grog Coin? What it gives you isn't grog. It's a bit misleading, but we
can sell grog with it later. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, actual grog. Can we do that?
We'll figure it out. Plans in mind.
Right.
We got some plans.
And the last thing I want to do is start selling knockoff moonshine to children. Because I'll really lose the moral high ground when talking about Travis. Not Riot, of course.
Wait, no, Travis. Richard, what do you mean about XQC gambling to minors illegally via VPN? Nah, fuck you, man. You're selling knockoff moonshine to kids. Like, no better than him.
The moonshine is fine. So anyway, we make our own cryptocurrency in Thorin Shed. That's where we make it. It's like a bite. All cryptocurrency
illegally at night.
Yeah. That's why Thorin's lost all that weight, mate. He's fucking been pedaling away. And what it does is it enables you,
like Rumpelstiltskin or something.
Rumple foreskin. Yes, your favorite. It enables you to ask us a question about anything. I think. That might include you, by the way, Jacob. Although you
And we don't
go or you
pre-screen
don't have to.
That's fine.
And we don't pre-screen them. No,
We don't pre-screen the questions.
it could be a page 4 disaster. Yeah.
Obviously, the joke now is the first question should be from a Mr. T. Gafford. Like, why can't we all just get along in this bloody
Mr. T. Gafford.
But Richard, did you like my
Does
tweet?
anyone know anyone else being kicked out of the house?
Did you at least appreciate my tweet about the gumption of a plucky young journalist? Because that was
I did like that.
entirely accurate use of that word.
I did.
He's got way too much gumption, some would say.
All right. Richard seems to think CSGO as an esport is on its last leg after almost a decade run. How much longer do you all see League of Legends lasting as a significant esports? I'm actually surprised that League of Legends still is a significant esport. Goes to show that games as a service have really changed the lifetime possibilities of esports overall.
What I would say is this, right? In the same way as I've said this many times, I always use this analogy. I've told Lurpis, Tommy, who obviously works for like IGC, MIBR, and formerly, was like a commentator, player in Counter-Strike. He's made a lot of tweets that were totally accurate about like potential corruption Elon Musk is involved in and lies about Tesla's like company, like numbers that they're going to hit and where their share price is. He's had so many points that were on point. But his problem was this. He assumed, right, well, now that people see it's corrupt, it'll just collapse in on itself, and therefore I can short it and I will be rich. And I said to him, the problem here, mate, is once you investigate the corruption in the way you have, you find out it isn't everyday nickel and dime corruption. It's corruption that is like hooked into government subsidies. That means you've got a direct pipeline from the taxpayer that can subsidize your company. You can get tax breaks that your rivals don't. And I said, basically, your problem you're entering here, mate, is even if it is corrupt, the people you need to come and save you in this scenario isn't the fucking police. It's like the SEC has to come down and do something about this guy with the stock price. And then you need someone to come along with an antitrust fucking investigation to break his company. And I said, basically, you've gotten to the level where he's big enough, mate. Like he can sort of get away in this bank heist analogy. Well, similarly, right, in this particular case, that's one of the problems I think you have in all these scenarios in esports is like, even if I want to say, well, look, League of Legends as a game engine is actually far, far behind any of its peers. It's decades behind, some would say. Even its reworks have been quite paltry compared to some of the things Dota 2 accomplished even 5-7 years. Yeah, a million angles. Obviously, it has massive problems in terms of even though it's had some successes in franchising, it's had, the problem is this, right? If instead I reframed the question like this, Monty, what could you accomplish as a games company that essentially can't be taken down by mass widespread sexual harassment of women, potentially sabotaging the cases of said women or public, also having like stories where you've basically stolen people's companies from them, allegedly, stories where you've literally made up situations that never occurred and literally financially punished people for these things, stories where you've played God with people's visas, and you can do all of this. You've gotten away with all of that so far, and here's what no one ever told you was the ace up your sleeve. Maybe someone who literally is directly hooked into the Chinese Communist Party is just directly part of your company within China. You know what? I think at that point in time, you can get away with a lot of stuff then. It's like when people do that old joke, like, how did they build the pyramids? If you have like unlimited slaves and zero fucking morals, you can get a lot of shit done. So the bad news is probably decades, Monty. Probably keep going forever. Probably be early 2050.
I am not on the analogy game as Duncan, on the same analogy level as Duncan. I will say, though, I think that it will continue for a really long time. I think that you do see a slight dip right now in things like LCS, but I think that because of their integrations in China is the biggest market for the entire game, right? And things like Wild Rift are going to bring more people into the game generally. But also they're playing smart in the West with their IP, right? Things like Arcane on Netflix, right? Like I always look at it this way, as the more people that get into your game, your esports community is a fraction of your game audience, right? Like it's a very small fraction. Well, if you continue to grow the game audience, then usually the esports audience continues to grow with it, right? If you're a competitive player versus player game. So when they are doing shows with Netflix, Spotify podcasts, comics with Marvel, right? Like all of this like IP integration that they're continuing to do with League of Legends, unrelated. But at the core, this is the opposite, because Overwatch did this with a bad game, right? They did a bunch of lore stuff with a cruddy game and no focus on sort of the development of the game long term. Riot's done the opposite. They focus on the game for 8 years or 9 years, right? Before they started doing sort of the mainstream stuff. Now they have a game that is at minimum functional, right? Playable, right? Like it's not up to speed with sort of 2020 developed, 2021 developed games, but nonetheless, it is a playable game that some people like myself enjoy. You can get into it, you can enjoy it. Nonetheless, when you are sort of opening the net on your IP, you're going to get more people in, and then they're going to discover the esport, whether via client or via other means, right? Social media, etc. So I think League survives the test of time because they've been smart with, they're embedded in the country of China, and they are sort of widening their IP net in the West in a way that is very effective.
To add to that, just briefly, they should learn from Activision Blizzard and give us details of Leona's toes in the same way you've done with Widowmaker. Those are the best toes. Delicious.
I think that the only thing that's going to unseat current esports is a tech development, because the thing that unseated 1v1 esports was a technological, like basically internet speeds becoming reliable enough to have team games where one person isn't disconnecting every game and ruining it for people, which is why we got 5v5. And the last big tech development resulted in Battle Royale, where you could have like 100 people in a server, but that didn't really lead to a viewable esport. So I think the only thing that is going to shift is the technological change to VR or something like that could produce a cool esport. That's my take.
Well, you have the famous tweet, Christopher, of Overwatch League's not an anime. And
Yeah.
I get your point about like not everything has to be an anime, but in the case of Riot, them making literally an anime in Arcane and things of the sort is going to increase their player base because again, unlike Overwatch, the game's playable.
So yeah, I mean the thing about the Overwatch League is not anime is, first off, I was just triggering the fan base for fun.
Oh, I know.
And second off, there's a difference between the sports product being an anime, right, or people treating real human beings who are playing these games as if they are anime characters, which I just find fucked up and disturbing. Which is what the Overwatch fan base does. Now, the game being an anime,
that themselves did do that, where they copied allegedly off that woman's entire life to make that like new fake Seraphine character that was tweeting. Like,
yes,
and the drawings were literally this woman's like fucking like personal photos on Twitter, and some rioter just like knew her or something mad. So
not to mention their
else do that.
Not to mention their original lore for her was that her mic was made from a genocide, which has a whole nother issue with it. It was made from Skarner's people, like the pieces.
Look, it's fiction. That's fine. It can be fucked up. It's allowed to be fucked up, Jacob. It's not real. Now, whether you support Seraphine as a character after that is a different story. But also to Thorin's point, whether you do or do not believe if the character was based off of this young woman, the really messed up thing that kind of like flew under the radar on that story was that she was an undergrad college student that was being like invited to Riot by some guy who was trying to date her to like impress people. It's like, holy shit, like that was to me, that was the really weird part, was like, so Riot employees are inviting college girls to come to Riot to show off, and then having artists draw pictures of the college girls in like Ari skins. Don't you think that's the weird part?
So Riot are inviting college girls down to Riot where they what is this? Is the beginning of the movie where they all get arrested? What fucking scene is this in the movie?
I think you'll just find it's from the DVD, or rather Blu-ray, I should say now, to not look like a boomer. Another day in Riot's offices, Duncan.
But to me, the fact that this could even happen, where it's like no one thought it was weird that you're inviting an undergrad to Riot to hit on her, and part of your courting process is asking Riot artists to draw pictures of her as League of Legends characters. Like, how did it get that far? How did that happen? Anyway,
basically because no one interrupted the nonsense. Right, Riot Games have always been a cult. They have presented themselves publicly as a cult. They have behaved in public as a cult. but because they happen to be funded by a Chinese mega
He
corporation.
obviously means colloquially. They didn't really say we are a cult, did they? Like, we know what you mean, though, Richard. They just like
Wait,
when you said that they publicly present themselves as a cult, like
No,
not
so-
explicitly, but
They,
you know,
they have
no,
been,
no, no,
they,
no,
they have behaved.
no. I'm being explicit.
Okay.
Let me
Yeah,
clarify. If you turn up at an event and you're wearing all the fucking same clothes, and it's a very specific type of clothing, and you're
Sure.
not a recognized religion, and you have a set of commandments by which you would adhere, and you enact them at an event, you're a cult.
It is very fraternity, sorority culture masquerading in a company.
Yes.
First
It's
time I
bad.
ever
It's bad.
saw Riot Games people turn up at a esports event, because I knew their existence. Because remember, I'd sat down there with D-Man and Joe Miller when they turned up at a fucking iSeries CS event wearing League of Legends t-shirts, because no doubt they'd been induced to do so. And I went, that game is fucking Dota for babbies. It'll never succeed. One time I was wrong, by the way. We can't win them all. And after that, there was an event in fucking Germany, probably at Gamescom. I think-
Cologne, yeah.
Yeah, and fucking Ocelot stole a fucking Baron or something, and everyone.
Yeah, that was Cologne.
Right. So I was there, and I even interviewed a few people like Crepo. That's aged badly, hasn't it? And we went and we did a thing, and then it was the after party, right? And we were at the after party, and a bunch of weirdo freaks came in red t-shirts. And we're like elbowing everyone. And we were like, what? It was free drinks, it was. And everyone who was in a red t-shirt was like being mad aggressive, like wrestling people out the side, and like someone tried to do it to me. I was like, what the fuck is this? And they were like going, it's our party. It wasn't. It was being run by, obviously, the tournament organizers and one of the sponsors. And we get to do so we go to the front of the queue every time. And it was all Riot employees in red t-shirts. This is no joke, by the way. It's literally how they behaved every time they went to an event.
So first off, there's a couple things here. My experience was that even when I was doing like world championships for League of Legends, they would have after parties after the world finals that I wasn't invited to because I was not a Riot employee, which is incredibly weird. Never experienced that with Activision or Blizzard or any other company. It's like, no, you were part of this event. You can come to the after party. So that was strange.
Have you never seen Muddy? They made a movie about it. It's called Eyes Wide Shut. Have you never seen it?
And the other thing is that it's in the name. Why do they call themselves rioters? Show me another company.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see Googlers or Blizzarders or Activisionists. Like, it's only this company that refers
They
to
just call
themselves in
themselves
this way.
activists now.
It sounds like a Command and Conquer faction or something. That sounds awesome.
No, but like, so let me also underline how mental it was, because again, it was like being in one of them moments where you don't realize body snatches, you don't realize anything's untoward. So before we got to the stage where everyone was like elbow dropping people and get out the way of the bar, so some fucking low level Riot employee could have a fucking gin and tonic, right? Before we got to that stage, I was in the press room and we had a screen so we could watch Ocelot steal a fucking Baron Nashor from where we were without having to walk out into a crowd of unwashed German people, right? So, but then what happened was, for whatever reason, the Riot game staff didn't like us having the TV. So one day I just came in as a press guy. I was like, where's the fucking monitor gone? And I got told by one of the higher ups at ESL, because I'm friends with all the execs at ESL. They went, "Oh yeah, Riot Games want a quiet area away from the press. So if you do want to see any direct footage, you will have to go out into the crowd." They just took it. They took the
There you
TV.
go.
Riot
Jesus
Games took the TV.
Christ.
Their game was so important to ESL. They got to do what the fuck they want. So yes, when I say Riot Games are a cult, I there's no hyperbole. They present themselves as a cult. If me, you, and Duncan, and go on, Jacob, I'll bring you along for this sick ride. If we all rock up to a place, all wearing the same clothes, same t-shirt, same color scheme, and we
We have a
start
problem.
kicking,
We have
we
a
start
problem.
kicking people around and going, you're not wearing the same clothes as dickhead. We're in charge here. If we start doing that, we're exhibiting cultish behavior.
Okay.
I hate to break it to you all.
I can't argue with that. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Right.
If a perma-ban system was in place, hypothetically, where players vote before a tourney an X amount of champions, guns, maps to be perma-banned throughout the tournament, what tournament do you think would have been more interesting to you based on a historical angle and or a meta angle? That's an interesting question. So I'm generally not in favor of bans because I feel
basically
like
it's like in COD, they do like gentlemen's agreement where it's like, if you all agree we're not going to use some OP weapon, I assume, then is that what he's asking? Like before the tournament?
basically like which event or game would be most benefited. I think Overwatch League or the GOATS meta is the obvious one of this, which was basically unwatchable.
The other one for League has got to be the 2015 Worlds, which was the one off the top of my head, which was the Juggernaut one, where it just ruined the tournament because you had to do like 3 bans on, I think it was Red Side or something, like otherwise you just lost the game. So there's with the classic one. Basically, any time they fuck the meta up and then it goes into a massive tournament, because actually most teams probably would agree to remove the one, I think it was like the Gangplank or something was OP, then a Mordecai. Like they would have just agreed to remove Mordekaiser, like no one to play that shit, just you had to ban it or play it, That's a classic one, I think. By the way, in CS, we would have had the same thing. ESL 1 Cologne in 2014 not only had 2 brand new maps that had never been used in competition, it had a randomizer, which meant that it was basically, unless both teams agreed to ban the map, you could potentially play it. Are you ready for the kicker? The team that won the tournament twice relied on getting that as the 3rd map, randomized map, and they won 16-14 both times. So it literally changed who won the tournament.
And not only that, what Duncan's leaving out is it just happened to be NIP.
It was also the team all fans wanted to see win as well, basically.
The greatest team to have never won a major at that point. So
that would be a way more infamous tournament if like one of the teams that people didn't want to win had won, put it that way. It was like the right team won, so everyone just pretended it didn't happen in CS history. It was fine.
Here's one from Mykles, one of the artists who regularly does stuff in esports. He says, as an artist, y'all have been a huge encouragement. What type of artistic content do you think the esports scene needs more of? And what would y'all enjoy to see? I think more storytelling content would be super cool. Like just anything that, represents the moment, like political cartoons and I know Thorin, you've started to do like satirical cartoons with the Tantalos, but like, I think that you could do something like 1-panel images that are really pithy that help tell like a story in esports. That'd be really cool to see to me.
Do you have some on this, Jacob? Is there anything you'd like to see more of in terms of art?
I was kind of thinking what Christopher said, because I think that just as a content issue, there's a lot of like one-off stuff from esports creators, right? Like they'll do one thing and then a couple months later they'll do something else unrelated. I would like to see things that kind of carry through more regularly, right? That are in relation to each other from an art perspective. So yeah, like repeating series or something, right? Like it's one thing that like Riot has done some of the stuff with comics, for example, with Marvel. They have the Marvel partnership. But I don't, it's not been particularly regular, I don't think. So like, I kind of seeing that type of like storytelling and lore, I actually kind of do like lore content. But being able to kind of tell it, even if it's like fan made, I think Skyen used to do a lot of this stuff. I don't think he does it nearly as much as he used to, but he used to, and it was kind of enjoyable. It's fun, something different.
Also, more sexual Anders fan fictions. I want more of those.
I'd like to see people doing things that are going to precipitate the death of this terrible industry. So I don't know what that would entail.
We need to literally make a real anime about the players that would attract just the right sort of mentally ill fangirl that would just literally destroy the whole industry.
Well, wasn't that was the big thing about the was it last year or the year before Worlds, where they had the animation with all the players and it literally was the anime with like Caps and others, right? Like that was a huge deal. Yeah. that went over really well.
But what I'm thinking is, I don't know, just maybe a fucking anime about like don't get involved in esports. Someone messaged, no joke, like why you shouldn't.
Horror
Yeah,
stories,
because they
esports
did
horror
that for everything else,
stories.
didn't they? Don't watch a fucking horror movie because it'll turn you into a Satanist, and don't go into that stranger's fucking car because he's going to molest you and kill you. You know, something like that for esports.
So the series is called Esports, not even once.
Yeah, no joke.
Each episode, it's a different esports character. Like, oh, hey,
We
this is young Richard
really
Lewis.
need. We
You know,
really. Yeah.
He's bright-eyed and can't wait to get into the field of journalism, which he hopes to express through the video game medium of esports.
I had one of those guys the other day.
To post on Reddit.
I had one of those guys the other day. He sent me a message. He sent me an email. And he said, I love you, love your work. And I just wondered if there was any advice for an aspiring journalist, you know, the one you get fucking, you know, 3 times a week. And it's the only time I usually don't reply to them anymore. It's all a waste of time. But I replied to this one. I said, listen, mate, no joke. And I sent him a really long, detailed reply. But basically it was don't. If you're vaguely talented, please don't come here. Go and lead a fulfilling life away from an industry ruled by morons and scum. Please, like have a nice life. So, but I don't know. He's probably not going to listen, is he? And he's probably going to think he can be an esports journalist.
We already got a fucking 20k a year salary from Upcomer, which have 3 million, yeah. Oh, did I say about that? Shit, my bad.
That's fucking good. That's good.
Whatever.
You've been sat on that one, mate.
Whatever.
Hired tomorrow.
Okay, so what is the best film or TV adaptation of a book you have read? Anything coming to mind for people?
Here's the thing, Jacob. We obviously do like question like these all the time. So if you have like a good one, Mitch, jump in. Do you have any that you would come up with?
I'm thinking.
And was it that it can be one that hasn't been made yet? Is that the premise, Monty?
What is it? No, you have to have seen.
Yeah, it has to be the best one.
Oh, which was the best adaptation, right? Basically, okay.
Holy shit! I mean, there are so many things that fall into that.
So I've said it before. While you guys think about it, Lord of the Rings is a terrible book, but it actually made some pretty entertaining movies. I will also say, here's a niche opinion. Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas is a good book, but it was actually a better movie than it was a book.
I read the book, but it was a very good movie. I thought so.
I mean, Catch Me If You Can. It's technically based off of a book.
I haven't read the book, but sure.
Yeah,
it's a great movie.
Read the book, and they're both good. Both good.
What Duncan is he so desperate to go? David Lynch's June. He loves that, but he didn't. For he is the Kwisatz Haderach. No, I'll throw in a curveball. I'm guessing we've all seen adaptation with Nicolas Cage, Charlie Kaufman, because that's actually based on a real book. I didn't even know that.
Really, I didn't know
when
that
I was
either.
watching.
Mostly the main point of the film is what happens in the film. He really just couldn't figure out how to write this fucking screenplay, so he did start thinking, "What if I wrote a movie about me struggling writing?" Basically, it is like a recursive theme in the movie. Isn't it?
So there is a book that you would never read in your life called The Orchid Thief.
I knew this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it's from the late 90s, and it's like a sort of weird romantic. Ooh, he's stealing flowers, but he's really stealing my flower. One of them, you know, for housewives kind of book. So I'd never fucking read it in a million years. But what Kaufman does is he takes a very ordinary book, adapts the book, and then adapts the adaptation to a movie to talk about the adaptation of the book. The whole thing, you have to watch adaptation to really appreciate it. But the fact that he takes a book that is throwaway dime store trash and turns it into a really slept on movie. I'm gonna be a hipster asshole and say that.
I mean, Charlie Kaufman is also one of the best writers in film, so it helps.
I'm super into like mini series. These, especially during COVID, they're like just things I binge because 5 episodes or whatever, 6 episodes that you can get through fairly quickly. There's one that came out before COVID and one that came out during COVID that I think were really good. So Patrick Melrose, the Benedict Cumberbatch Showtime series, is really fucking great. The books are solid too, right? Like they're really lengthy if you read all of them. And they tried to dumb down all the books into one series, which was hard, but I think they did a fairly good job. And then I Know This Much Is True, HBO Max, Mark Ruffalo series. He plays both brothers. There's one with mental illness and then the other brother is trying to support him. That one's also really good. He's both characters because they're twins. So cool. both well done.
I love that last series of Game of Thrones. Oh, George R. Martin gonna
So Richard, this blends in. This blends in
one.
directly to the next question. With Dexter coming back to amend the crap ending of the TV show, what would you like to come back to amend their shitty ending? Which is definitely.
I didn't give my answer, so I would say for my answer for the best adaptation, I actually did a whole video on this on my side channel. I think the flaw with adaptations is this: they're usually just a worse version of the source material because they don't have as much time and they have to make the story simple and they can't show people's POVs in the same way as you can in a novel. So basically, I actually think the best adaptations are ones that don't make an attempt to translate directly. They do what you do when you translate from another language. There's one of them. That's the title of the video. It's about adaptation. Naked Lunch is one. Another great example would be Inherent Vice. Basically, if you've ever read a Thomas Pynchon novel, you can't make a movie out of those. So instead of doing that, they make sort of the vibe of the movie like a Thomas Pynchon novel. I like that approach.
Wolf of Wall Street's in that same cut too. It's a
true.
autobiography by Jordan Belfort, and the movie is a very loose adaptation with the same premise. Also quite good. I think that's why people really like the movie. Probably never read the book, but yeah, the book is quite literal. The movie is not. So yeah.
I apologize, Duncan. I stole your thunder twice on a couple of points there because it turns out what everyone says about us being one mind is actually true, evidently. So sorry about that.
You also preempted the shitty ending remaking question, which
what was the premise of that we can just pick a series to remake the ending or something?
Yes, exactly. With Dexter coming back to remake the ending, which series would you like to see the ending remade? Which is Game of Thrones, I think.
That's
probably the most popular answer.
What's funny about Game of Thrones, by the way, as an aside, is this. I totally understand. I think it's entirely logical how that came to be. First of all, if you know the story, that the writers had already essentially signed on to go and do those Star Wars movies that they're now never going to get to make. So they were sort of like, let's rush this out the door. That's why they made less episodes, but they were like slightly longer. And then secondly, if you remember, if you ever actually read what they claimed happened, it wasn't, this is a total misnomer. It is not that George R.R. Martin told them, here's what happens. He told them supposedly something like 3 details. So if you really think, spoiler, that those details were just like, by the way, in the end, you know, Daenerys sort of goes a bit mad as a tyrant, this character dies, and then this person becomes the king. If you just told people those 3 facts, and the people aren't very good writers, they could easily reverse engineer a million things that never happened in the book and had nothing to do with the ending. So to me, I never took it as that big a deal. Like, I assume the book will be completely different. In terms of this one, though, it's hard because I have to say, I'm not that huge a TV fan, so I don't really have that many series that I thought were like awesome and then just ended really badly. Like, for example, when everyone complains about Dexter, I don't know how y'all were still watching. I
watched
I watched it all the way through.
Quit on the series where a woman came onto my television and went, gee willikers, fucking Dexter, I am from the UK. And I'm like, that's the end of the show. I watch other shows now. So, Americans, you will never, ever condescend to me that someone who can't do a British accent and does a Dick Van Dyke is doing a British accent. That's the end of all your shows. Close it down. It's over. So I never saw the last seasons of that one.
I quitted the second season because it was already so stupid. It's just like House of Cards. As soon as like the second episode, as soon as you like pushed that woman in front of the subway, I was like, this is stupid. I just stopped watching it.
By the way,
to be fair, the original UK one it's based off, which is brilliant, I think. He does throw off a building, so. Yeah.
By the way, on the previous question, I just thought of another like very well adapted thing. The Wire. The Wire is an adaptation of Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets, and I think it's a very wonderful adaptation that's very loose, based off of a reporter's book, right? Like, The Wire's a great series.
All right, I'm going to do one more long question, and then I'm just going to get through this one real quick, which is, what do you think about the LEC hosting and promoting LCS, for example, in regards to the interest of LEC team owners being overstepped for the interest of LCS team owners? Whatever, it's all owned by the same company. Like, that's fine. It's cool. You should cross-promote as much as possible. I don't think that's controversial. And so the last question, because we've been on the show forever now, is opinion, and this is relevant to Jacob Wolf, opinion on the Sky Williams house shit typhoon. So Jacob,
there you go.
No, I said this earlier. There's a big video that came out this past week that's kind of resurfaced it by a YouTuber named Technicals, who's kind of the same cloth as Keemstar, drama YouTuber, and I think he like. The argument that the fact that people can't understand
is that an accurate description, by the way, Jake? Because I don't want you to get caught out. when you say from the same cloth, do you mean he is like they both do drama YouTube content, or do you mean he is similarly controversial?
They do both. Both. He's a drama YouTuber who is controversial among among sort of the rest of the community, and is, from screenshots we saw this past week, acting in bad faith as he wants to dox a 15-year-old. Here's what I'll say. There was a screenshot that came out of him that he put on his stream of a conversation he had with Zero, the former TSM Smash player who was accused multiple times of sexual harassment. And they are trying to decipher who an anonymous a girl who was at one time anonymous and or was anonymous when she came out, and she was 15, and she claimed that Zero was sexually explicit with her. And they are trying to figure out who it is. If you don't immediately know who that person is, if you did that to more than one teenager, you have a problem. Like, seriously, if you don't know which one, if you have to go, which one is it? There's a problem. And there was a Discord conversation between the two of them that Technical showed on a stream last week that was basically like, trust the plan. We'll figure it out together. Well, if we can discredit this one person, they'll flip and tell us who she is.
It was just like when Riot got all them lawsuits. Like, a woman is suing you.
Which one?
For systemic sexism and inappropriate sexual behavior, and they were like, "Well, right, you are going to have to narrow it down."
You had one of those giant boards of "Who am I?" up in front of them. Right, gotta give him more.
That's exactly.
You are going to have to narrow it down.
The problem with the technical videos is it tries to discredit Jisoo, but by saying she was vindictive and that there was a group chat with the roommates of the Sky House saying that she was vindictive towards Sky. Okay, put yourself in her shoes for just a minute. If you are a teenager, you are moved out to this random house and you are molested by a man 10 years your senior, right? If that's the case, wouldn't you fucking hate the people that allowed that to happen to you and house the man?
Seems reasonable.
Right? Like,
I want to be vindicated. Yeah, it seems quite reasonable response.
Like, put yourselves in the shoes of someone who was traumatized. Like, yeah, of course she's upset. Does that make what she said any less truthful? No, but of course she's upset. And like, in the case of like what it tried to do to break down my article on the whole situation, it did nothing to discredit Brandon Woody, who was a big part, though I interviewed him twice for my story, was a big part of the reporting I did. Like, the whole thing, it was the only person that YouTuber talked to. This is why I say it's in bad faith. The only people he talked to were Sky Williams and Zero. He did not talk to any of the other roommates, who talked to me, by the way, would probably talk to him. I would understand if the victims didn't want to talk to him, because he's done several videos where he's trying to clear the name of people accused of sexual abuse, right? Like Anti and others. So I would understand if you were the victim, you wouldn't want to talk to them. But nonetheless, like, talk to the other roommates who lived in the house and have an opinion, and he didn't. So I've been kind of bothered by the whole thing the past few days, because I just think, like, some common sense. Of course someone is upset that was allowed to happen to them.
Look, I think the Sky Williams house is...
I interviewed you for that story, by the way. So
yeah,
there you go.
I mean, I lent him $1,000. He did pay me back for what it's worth.
And we said that.
I mean, yeah, he's also, grifted many people. And I think in a nutshell, like, it shows many of the worst aspects of esports, which is that things appear fun on the surface and grassroots on the surface, but the lack of professionalism, the lack of oversight, the large number of young people means that it is rife for abuse. And you are going to get many bad actors that would be rooted out quickly in other industries for their behavior, but they are allowed to basically hide and abuse people within a kind of competitive gaming world. Partially because there's not, enough money, partially because there's a kind of a lack of professionalism and experience, which is slowly getting better over time. But, it's
I just want to end I just want to say this about this topic, right? Like, because it's clear from seeing the conversation that Technicals had with Zero on that he showed on that stream. It's clear, like, I interviewed Sky Williams for 4.5 hours for that piece earlier in the year, right? Where a lot of it, like, at one point, the first interview I did, he was super drunk and belligerent. And then the second time when I came back and interviewed him 2 days later, he's like, I just want to let you know, and we quoted this, I just want to let you know I'm sorry for being angry and black. It's literally what he said to me. And I was just like,
Weird. Okay.
like, what?
Yeah, you
Like,
have to be
whoa,
like,
whoa, 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 whoa. No,
listen,
like,
mate, you don't have to apologize.
I had that on
for by the way.
recording.
Yeah. It's like so wild, dude.
I was just like,
don't-
what? Like, I don't, you can't just blame the fact that you're like trying to discredit people on like a racial stereotype. That's not okay either,
That's
right?
whack,
Like,
obviously, yeah.
yeah. And so, like, the whole thing is ridiculous. What bothers me though is like, these people Zero, Sky, Anti, all these guys, they can go have a life doing something else. They don't have to be public figures in power, but they're so clinged on to it that like they're literally like working with drama YouTubers to like try to discredit their victims.
Nobody,
that's not okay either.
Nobody likes it when it's over, though, Jacob. But that's
true.
You know, it's like all these streamers who hang around too long, all these influencers who hang around too long, and they get embroiled in all this shit, and then, you know, they think they can go away for a little bit and come back, and sometimes they actually can't because their communities are fucking trash. It's just another reason, Richard Lewis Manifesto, esports must be destroyed. So it all comes back to that.
Esports delanda est. Are you familiar with?
Yeah, it's got to go.
You familiar with the quote about Carthage must be destroyed?
Yes. Except Carthage, actually. The sad thing about that quote is Carthage
they didn't deserve it.
Of worth. Yeah, they did not deserve all the right. Esports definitely does. So,
That's funny. Well, it sounds like Thorin, do you have any thoughts on the Sky Williams business?
All I'll say is this. I never gave that fucking clown any of my time when we're talking about the time period he was famous about 7 years ago. I don't miss. I have an insane radar for people who are utter cretins. And once I'd like you just done at that point in time. So I just, listen, I don't pick many people, but the ones that I do just completely disassociate from. Because the problem with him was he was just an obvious rampant narcissist from day one. I never bought anything. Here's the other thing, right? Growing up as someone who had to learn how to like read facial reactions and how people actually are. It was so obvious this guy wasn't like a fucking legitimate, genuine person, that he was just sort of a fraud. Now, as far as I can tell, it turns out he's a fraud from himself, and that's how he even embroiled his friends and all this stuff. So it was even more tragic. He wasn't even just a grifter. In some ways, I can at least acknowledge the grifter who understands what he's doing. As far as I can tell, this is a guy who's even lying to himself the whole time. But like one of the mad red flags for me was, if you remember, he was one of the first people to ever do one of those videos where he's just crying because he's had his ad rev taken away on YouTube. Like, oh, guys. And it's like, mate, there's something really wrong when you're doing that.
He was kind of the inventor of what became the T. Martin dog apology, like the like holding your dog's hand.
Just
how are we gonna make this video?
I want it on the public record. Like,
shit.
I've gone out drinking with Sky. I've got Sky wrecked in a Vegas casino and tucked him up in bed, and you know we've hung out, and I don't know. Motherfuckers, like a lot of people in this business, like they just lose sight of what's going on. They get swept up in it, and shit happens in their fucking orbit. And they don't do anything to stop it, and that's bad. And you've got to carry the can for that. And then people think they don't have to carry the can for that, and they'll never have to carry it. When the story broke, it wasn't that I was one of those people who like made a point of like cutting him off, but I didn't reach out to him either. And I wanted to see if he'd reach out to me, and he didn't. So it was like, obviously, he didn't think that highly of me, that he was going to turn to me in a fucked up situation. But equally, I know him to be a liar and a fantasist a little bit. Not the worst type of person you're going to come across in esports. Seemed to me he got wrapped up in the idea of having an entourage and being the guy who was going to pay for everything when the times were good. And when he had money, he gave it away, essentially, because he wanted people to look up to him. And when he had no money, he didn't have the sense to say, "Fuck, I've got no money." He kept paying for things he couldn't afford.
Mate, you're being very charitable, because here's the problem, right? When you say it like that, it sounds so reasonable, like, and then he got into trouble. Next thing you know, he was lending money to maintain life. The problem with that, Richard, is I'd just take it back to my real life. If I literally stole £100 from someone, I'd be fucking dead the next day, hung off a fucking like washing line. Like the idea that you could ever amass like tens of thousands stolen and then go, oops, my bad, guys, I was going through depression. Like, I'd love to live in your fucking world. Tell you
I'm
what,
shocked he's out of jail.
should we talk about the term privilege, motherfucker? Because you've got so much coming out your ass. You thought it was talent.
No, so no, but on that point, it's like that. I know this makes me sound like a big softy, and what I'm supposed to do is go, yeah, fuck it, I hate all of them. I hate all of the people who steal and lie all of the time. There is sometimes some context, and I think with Sky, I think what happened was he kept getting in too deep. He kept lying to people, kept asking to borrow money. He asked to borrow money off me, caught me at a real bad time, or I would have lent him a bunch, actually. It was just after I'd paid for something else and paid a lot up front. And otherwise, he could have probably lent on me for 10 grand, which is what he was asking for, and I would never have seen that again. No doubt, Duncan, I'd be like, yo, fuck it.
Well, like, the worst thing is, if we could only go back in time and set up Travis Gafford with Sky Williams as his benefactor, they could have bankrolled this shit for half a decade. Fucking Bob's your uncle, kill two birds with one stone.
But the whole thing's just incredibly complicated. And what bothered me as someone who interviewed him for 4.5 hours is he was very obsessed with what Twitter eggs were saying, which like he was like, people are calling me the Epstein of Smash, and I was just like, Scott.
You don't own your own island.
and like I was like, and he's like,
no, he's such a melodramatic cunt. Like, you see, it's things like that make me fucking miss the cunt in a way. Because he was so over the top. He didn't do any of the bad shit that happened in his house. It's just that you've got to carry a can for happening on your watch in your gaff, right? But he didn't fucking molest anybody or do anything fucked up like that.
But that's what bothered me, was he kept saying like, well, people are saying that I raped people and I sexually abused people.
No one said that either.
I was like, who said that? The Twitter egg with 2 followers?
Yeah.
Like, nobody have a critical note. Sky, I'm not accusing you of that. I'm asking you about the stuff that happened in your house. I think the real reason,
Jacob, I think the real reason I'm sympathetic is Sky Williams became a public figure almost overnight, blew the fuck up, and like me, like when you don't conceive of yourself as a public figure, it's impossible to understand the rules you have to play by as a public figure, and that's what fucked him. That people are going to say mad shit about you. You're a public figure, of course. You know that celebrity you talk shit about. Yeah, that's you now to that person. Right. You have to live with it, and he never understood that. I don't think he's a bad and malevolent force. I think he's a narcissist who got kind of a bit wrapped up in his whole life. Don't think he ever meant to hurt anybody. I think the whole entourage thing got out of his control. At the end of the day, it's one thing to have like 2 or 3 mates you look after and cut checks for and buy meals for.
By the time 25 people.
By the time you have 20 motherfuckers sleeping on the floor in a house that's your lease that you can't even afford to rent for, like he needed a motherfucking intervention, but the only people in his orbit were the fucking leeches and scumbags that were using him for a paycheck. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit sympathetic because I know the guy.
I think you can play both sides of the ball here. You can be sympathetic towards that, and then also at the same time be like, but why didn't you intervene? If I asked him this, like, I was like, why didn't because I've seen screenshots of like other roommates telling him that they hear a teenage girl being molested in his home, right? They're in the same room as the man and the girl, right? And it's like, so why didn't you intervene? And he's like, oh, well, I like had suspicions and I was going to call CPS or whatever, right? And Child Protective Services. And it's like, okay, so why didn't you?
Yeah, probably all.
Right? Why didn't you? If you knew this was happening, kick them the fuck out of the house. But instead, like he would go to, in this case, Jisoo, he would go to her and be like, "Can I help you? Like, is there something wrong?" And of course, she said no, because she felt powerless. She was in a place she had nowhere else to go. Her family was really like terrible to her too. You know, like what is she gonna say? Yes, guy, help me. No, she's gonna lie, and that's like an understandable.
Just on a serious note, thinking about what he said, where people called him the Epstein of Smash, he sort of is in a way because he didn't kill himself. We're out.
Jesus. Jesus Christ. Wow. Well,
that's not where I expected that to go. Damn.
Jesus. Well, on that note, you know, just another fucked up day in the world of esports. And Richard, I do appreciate that, you know, you did bring up the esports must be destroyed, which I think is a fantastic way to end our show from now on, because I think no. So the whole thing is if you guys don't know,
is this an esports cryptocurrency?
You met me at a very strange time, mate. It's all the fucking towers just coming down.
So the whole thing is, if you guys don't know, look up Carthago delenda est, which is Latin for Carthage must be destroyed. Yeah, there you go. A Cato quote. But I think it's definitely okay. Cato is one of your heroes.
Yeah,
as he got angry.
I've got about 5 books about Cato up there. You might be able to say no joke.
So
Rome's Last Citizen is a great book. Read that.
There you go. And so esports delenda est as well. I think it's a great way to end the show in general, because it's always the topic of why this show exists. So anyway, we'll see you guys next time on the Four Horsemen. Probably soon, given how things are going, and our schedules are freed up right now for everybody involved. No more, well, Thorin has RMRs, but no one else does. All right. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll see you next time.